Take two.
There we go.
All right.
All right. Hopefully, you guys are doing well this evening. We want to welcome you to something that we don't get a chance to do very often, and that is just sit around and talk about some hot takes that exist in the world of TTRPGs. I am Mike. This is Nate. We are part of the Elite Encounters crew. And normally you would be tuning in right now to see Bloodlords on Monday night at 6:30. Or Dawn of the Frogs. Or, you know, a group of people that are going to role play without their dungeon master. But here in the lovely state of Indiana, we have been inundated with about 10 inches or more of snow. So a lot of the crew were not able to make their way here. So we have thrown together a list of some really interesting ideas or concepts or just general talking points when it comes to TTRPGs. You can consider them hot takes. You could consider them, I don't know, polarizing opinions, right? But the goal here is not to elicit an argument or anything like that. The goal here is to have some open discussion. I brought Nate in because much like myself, he is a player here at Elite Encounters, but he is also a game master. So we have a little bit of both sides of a coin. I have GM'd some things, but I have not like game mastered a long running campaign. And so my experience in those kind of topics are very limited. And so I wanted to provide an atmosphere where we could have some discourse or some discussion. And of course, the chat is obviously open down below. If you want to chime in and you want to join in on all the fun, you're more than welcome. So also, like, what do you think of that cool Hot Takes logo, right?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was pretty awesome. Threw that together last minute and it came out really, really well. But I do want... so I'm running the entire ATEM from my my tablet here, so there may be some things that kind of feel clunky, right? But we'll get through it. And
we have no Overwatch, no Jinx.
Yes, no Overwatch, no Jinx, but we're going to be pushing buttons here and hoping everything does like I says it does. By the way, if we're blaming anybody, we're blaming Jinx and Overwatch in this particular.
And Microwatch.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so... Okay, here we go.
Well, you want to give a little bit of background here too about, like, you mentioned that, you know, you're a player, you've GM'd some things. like how long have you been playing TTRPGs and
Sure.
running them?
I have been playing TTRPGs. Let's throw that back up there. I've been playing TTRPGs since I was a freshman in high school. I'm now in my early 40s. So you do the math, because I won't do it on the internet, because that's how people look like fools. But you do the math. So I've been playing for quite some time. I have no background in thespians or acting or any of that kind of stuff, or even improv, like comedy or any of that kind of stuff. So I literally, my first exposure into any of this collaborative storytelling or improv was Dungeons and Dragons. I was introduced by my friend Don and taken to his game that his dad ran, and then got kind of introduced to another group of people where I ended up meeting our seer that runs our game on Tuesdays, in which I played a very long running campaign where I played kind of the same character for about 8 years. So with that all kind of wrapped up being said, fast forward a few years, we've put together Elite Encounters, where we come together on Monday and Tuesday nights to try to give you some entertainment, about 3 hours worth of entertainment each night. Monday we play a Paizo Adventure Path, and Tuesday we play in that homebrew world with Danielle, who's our seer, in that world that we've kind of crafted over the last 20 plus years. So and if you want to kind of tell us about yourself there, Nate.
Similarly, I too was introduced into not Dungeons and Dragons, but Pathfinder. Well, I guess no, the first actual game that I played was a one-shot 5e ran by Don Martyr.
Hey.
Who
guy that holds all the glue together, right?
He plays Gale on our Tuesday night show, for those that you don't know. That was, probably 10 years ago or so. I was either in college or freshly out of college. Gives a little bit of background of like when I started. Then I was invited into his Pathfinder campaign, which then transitioned into Pathfinder 2e when that came live. And then a couple of my friends that introduced me to Don actually bought me the 3-book set, the Player's Guide, DM's Guide, and the Monster Manual for 5e. And then I just kind of ran with it. Like I absorbed them and then wrote my own one-shot with like a whole world behind it, thinking that I was going to make a campaign out of it. It fizzled and didn't go anywhere after running the one-shot, but I've ran multiple one-shots. I did end up running a 5e campaign for my kids at home, and then for a couple of friends for a few sessions, and then we have our home game that we've ran monthly for 2.5 years now, almost 3 years. So it's been a long-running campaign, almost level 20. So that was the whole goal, was to run through and get to level 20, and then we'll start something fresh after that. So that gives a little bit of background about me. And then I've been playing Chevy weekly Tuesdays here for 6 months now. When was that I joined? I don't remember. It was episode 60 something. So we're talking.
Do you remember like what
episode.
month? I don't even remember what month you came.
It's been over a year then.
Yeah, it's been
because we're at episode almost 120 now, right?
We're getting there. Yeah, we're getting
so
pretty close.
We've been almost 60 episodes, which means we're over a year almost that I've been here, I think. So don't quote me on that. But
I will. Don't worry. Quoting will ensue.
In my free time, I also love just building characters on Pathfinder or Path Builder, D&D Beyond, you name it. I've built hundreds of characters, maybe thousands at this point, just testing things. So massive gaming tables. And yeah, I've built massive gaming tables. Yeah, like this one here.
Okay, so I had some music playing earlier. I could throw that on and then turn it down really low, just so there's something else in the background besides just Nate and I droning. Chat, let me know if you want me to throw that music back on. If not, we're gonna move on. And again, we'll see how this all works, but we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here. So tonight we're going to talk about, I have 12, I guess you can call it like 12 ideas or opinions or statements that we are going to talk about. And they start at kind of like medium spicy, and they range all the way up to things that you should probably be punching your grandma and kicking your dog, and a little a little uneasy. It'll make you a little uncomfortable, right?
You know, medium spice is actually my favorite spice girl. So.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Is that because she's like the right height? Medium spice?
She's psychic, yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Medium spice. Oh boy. Okay, I'm gonna try and turn that music back on and try and turn it down. So let me know if it does what I want it to here. Seems to be doing good. I can't hear it at all.
I can't hear anything because I don't have a sound pack in.
No? Okay. Not sure what's going on there, but do what? You can try. Okay, so turn the volume down a little bit, please. Should just be the overall PC volume. Let's see if I can get that to work. That'll work right there. Okay, so this is an interesting topic to start with. So the GM's enthusiasm sets the ceiling, but the players set the floor. So what does that really mean? So we've seen great GMs be able to take a table of mediocrity and kind of elevate the whole table by telling an epic story or just doing all the homework and putting all the right pieces in place. But ultimately, only engaged players are going to be able to keep that whole table from collapsing. Fangirl, how are you doing? Glad you dropped in. We're starting off talking about enthusiastic GMs setting the ceiling for the campaign or the stream or the one shot, but the players set the floor. So what do you think? Do we agree? Do we disagree? And we'll throw that back right here so you can check it out as we talk. Look, it's almost like professional.
Yeah.
It's almost like we've done this before. But let's have some chat about that. So what do you think that when you hear that a GM's enthusiasm sets the ceiling, but the players set the floor? Nate, what resonates with you about that, and why would you say that's a hot take for most people nowadays?
I think I'm going to disagree with this one. So I think it's a collaborative. I think it's a collaborative effort. I think the players and the GM have to come together to create that atmosphere and the enthusiasm and the spark that lifts everybody up when you hit that nat 20 and everyone's excited. I think the floor is the whole table, including the GM. I don't think that there is a ceiling. I don't think necessarily GM sets the ceiling. I think that you can be as excited as you want to be in that moment, or as deep into that touching moment as you want to be, as you're feeling it. And I don't think that anyone necessarily sets a ceiling on what you're feeling in that moment. So that's what I've got to say.
Microwatch, drop that volume just a little more. Just kind of want that.
Sky's the limit. That's right,
just,
Hyper.
Yeah, just in that. Drop that down a little more so we can just be right there in the background. But so these are kind of the things that when I think about this, let's talk about what the ceiling means. Like, what does that mean, right? So the ceiling of your campaign kind of is at the narrative discussion of your game master. So if you're running like Bloodlords and you're kind of at the whim of an adventure path, most of the hard work of the development of the world, the story, the hooks, the players, the NPC players, and that kind of stuff is all done for you, which frees you up to do a lot of the other narrative things that you maybe wouldn't have had time for. So a lot of those things rely heavily on the GM to be able to kind of stretch their creative muscle in an area where maybe they're running the adventure path to AP, or if they're running that homebrew world, they have to balance out this idea of how much time do I devote to these creative things that I'm going to do versus maybe developing the world, or maybe leaning into the depth of the NPCs.
Yep.
When you play something that's already written, most of that stuff, unless you're going to embellish a lot, most of that stuff is already there. So I do want to talk about some things about the floor, though. Like, what if you have players that set the bar really low, then they could be just as destructive to a game.
That's true.
that maybe an over-prepared GM or even a grossly under-prepared GM could have the same effect. And what do I mean by that, right? So players showing up on time, right? We all are adults. We all respect each other's time. We respect each other's creativity, and nothing's worse than planning out your whole game session and having everything ready to go, saying we're going to start at 2:00 and 2:30 rolls around and 3/4 of your party's not there still.
Yep.
So you walk in and you've already been stifled by the punctuality of your players, right? A lot of this is things that, and we're not here to bash on people. We're not here to, throw shade. But these are the things that are disruptive to the whole table, right? Paying attention, man. Playing a game every week, for me, playing 2 games every week, 2 totally different games, I find that paying attention is something that I've had to grow in my own ability to do. And I say that being a long-running TTRPG player, but there is a significant difference on what we do on Monday night and what we do on Tuesday night that warrants my attention. On Monday nights, we make a conscious effort to try to be more focused on the game and more in tune with what we're doing. And on Tuesday, we try to be a little more relaxed, a little more interactive with the chat, a little bit more aware that we are doing something on the internet versus the story that we're engrossed in. And I'll tell you, that has wild effects on me because I will find myself on occasion on Monday night, like looking at chat and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. And then I'm like, dang, pay attention, dummy. Or on Tuesday night, I'll find myself that I've thrown my phone on the floor and I've completely ignored. And, Jenny's over there, hey, we've gotten raided. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah.
Completely out of the loop. And I find that that's a struggle for me because, one, we do it 2 different ways intentionally. But paying attention is always something that I've prided myself on, that I know what's going on, I know what's happening. But when you play as often as we do, it's hard to keep everything lined up.
I think
right?
For the most part, at least within our table, I can only speak for Tuesday nights. I won't speak for Monday nights, but I can say that I watch you guys every Monday and or at least watch the live or watch afterwards. I think you guys do a good job there too. But I think at least on Tuesday nights, what I've seen, we do a really good job of that paying attention bit, and we're engrossed on both sides, both in the story, paying attention to that, but also one of us is looking at the stream and looking at chat and making sure that, like, oh, Zimidus just got an environmental effect. We need to, get that. So I think we're pretty good at, balancing that. So pat on the back for us there, I guess. But
let's talk about the idea of supporting each other in our moments, right? This can be very difficult for some people. Some people don't want the spotlight, like don't want to be in the proverbial, this is your part of the story arc moments. And then you have some people that really thrive in that environment. And then you have some people who, whether they do it on purpose or not, will kind of banter back and forth and take that spotlight. What does that look like? What does that look like when you start talking about this idea of supporting each other's moments? Why would you say that's part of the ceiling and part of the floor? Because it's very important.
It's important, yeah. So part of the ceiling, part of the floor. It's important because, like, last Tuesday, for example, we had very deep, touching moments in Chevy's backstory, right? And you all did a great job, I think, when I first approached the house, of saying we're at a respectful distance to allow this to take place. We're not here to steal the spotlight, because that was Chevy's moment, right? And I think likewise, when we were in Layla's hometown, we allowed her to experience that moment of, retouching with her family. And I think we do a good job at that. And then when moments get, you have very deep moments and then you've got to come out of those, I think we also do a good job of having not necessarily stealing the spotlight, but those comedic relief moments where someone has a little bit of a witty banner to add in, and then we're like, oh, hey, by the way, this ghost ship just arrived, time to go. So it helps relieve that tension in a way that feels more natural, and then you can get on to the next scene. So I think, again, we do a really good job at that, and kudos to everyone on our team here that does that.
So have you ever, Nate, been part of maybe sessions where the players are very disengaged? And what does that do as a GM, or even as a player? What does that do for you? And then how do you combat that, right? Because I imagine that's pretty destructive.
Yeah. So I'll speak from my GM perspective for a moment. That when I first started our campaign that's been going on for almost 3 years now, I expected it to be more of a heavy role-playing game up front, knowing that most people were new to it, but having some like depth into Critical Role a little bit from what I knew of the people at the time. But quickly found out that most of the people in our group didn't really care about that roleplay aspect all that much, and really just wanted to play a fighting simulator, which is fine. That's a whole totally other way to play the game. Whereas on Tuesday nights, I would say that we do a pretty good mix of the two. So I wouldn't necessarily say that was destructive, but it definitely took me a session or two to get that vibe down and understand these players don't want this heavy roleplay, or at least they're not engaging with that. I need to switch up my play style a little bit and how I run the game so that I can do something that these players are going to engage with. And for our monthly game, that is mostly battle. And so I narrate a little bit of story, and then we're literally just playing battles for like 3-4 hours every month for these sessions, just because that's how I design it now, because that's where you guys seem to have most fun, and that's what it's about. It's about having fun. So
that's right.
And not to say that that's a wrong way to play it or a right way to play it. It's just what is the most fun for everyone at the table. And I'm not going to sit there and force everyone to have a heavy roleplay moment if that's not what they're into, right? So,
sure.
So. Yeah.
So when you talk about this idea of there being like a game master that kind of carries the weight or the burden of the performance of, and not that's a terrible term, but the effectiveness of the game. I think that ties directly into how we put together like these villains for these campaigns. So you have this idea that you have the big bad guy, the BBG, as you would say, and I love talking about villains because I love hearing people's opinions on what makes a good TTRPG villain, right?
Yep.
So
we got a question about that. Good segment.
The best villains are constant, not clever. So let's see if it does what I want it to. No.
It didn't.
It will now. Hold on. Bam!
Bam. It's like magic.
It is. It is like magic.
Technology.
Okay. So people think that the best villains that you run into are these masterminds, right? So think James Bond or any of these movies that you watch. They always capture the hero and they always tell you my master plan.
Sure.
Right? Most of the time, that's just like I don't find that very logical. It's not. Yeah. Logical is not the right answer, but I don't feel like that's very realistic as far as TTRPG bad guys.
Sure.
Right. Very rarely are you going to run into just the guy who is the mastermind, controlling and pulling all of the strings everywhere. But I do find that if you have a bad guy that is predictable, it's almost terrifying. because you almost know without, like a clock is ticking, you almost know exactly how they're going to respond to things that you do. I'll use my example with Tuesday nights with Charlotte, right? I know without a shadow of a doubt, every time we run into this great and wonderful person, she's going to do everything in her power to destroy everything that's mine, right? Whether that means she's trying to actively kill me or actively kill everyone that I care about. And it's come to the point where it's very predictable. I know that when we fight her, or when we get into combat with her, or when she's in the same place as me, everybody is at risk. And that's terrifying, because one, you don't know when you're going to run into the bad guy. At least we don't. And so you almost kind of walk around on eggshells the whole time, under this idea that at any moment she could appear out of nowhere and, start crazy chaos.
Yep. That's part of the reason why Chevy doesn't want to stay in Morathel, is because although Charlotte is much more invested in you, Chevy did work for her at one time, and she probably wants revenge on Chevy for turning on her. She doesn't seem like the type of person that would just let that go away. So I feel like Chevy would not want to put his family at risk by staying there until all these problems are resolved and we can get on with our lives, right?
Sure. So. What do we what do you think, chat? What do you think about these villains, right? So you have constant villains, which are these guys, like I said, are more persistent and more predictable. Then you have these clever villains. Now, the thing with these clever villains is they kind of play the gotcha game, right? So they kind of like swoop in, pull the rug out from underneath of you, and then you get into the big fight, and then you either handle it or they kind of run away. And then they kind of keep doing this like gotcha game, where they kind of run in, yank the rug out from under you, throw all the stuff into chaos. There's a battle, and then either you get them or you don't, right? But this idea of a constant bad guy is just, man. I go back to, and we reference Critical Role here and things that they do, but there's just, if you watch their stuff, there is an extreme undertone of the bad guy is very constant, right? And it goes all the way down to even like the hierarchies of bad guys. There's the big bad guy who is extremely constant. You know exactly how he feels and exactly what he's doing. And then you have all of his little underlings that they kind of run into, and they're just as terrifying because they are just as constant, just as harassing, just as, every time you see them, shit's about to hit the fan, right? And there's never a moment that you see those characters on the board and think, maybe they'll just talk this time. It's just like, oh, you're here. Oh, great. Here we go.
Yep. I think the best villains can be both. And what comes to mind here, if anyone has played or read through Curse of Strahd, which is a 5e module, I have prepped for this to run a Curse of Strahd in 5e, and I'm probably going to port it over to Pathfinder, actually run it in 2e maybe. That's one of my... I've read almost every 5e adventure module. Curse of Strahd by far is my favorite. But Strahd is meant to be played as a very consistent villain. Even like in the earliest levels of the game, he's supposed to show up and just be a consistent villain, consistent threat, constantly bugging you, just, being an ever-looming presence in Barovia. And at the same time, he is clever because he has been a vampire for hundreds of years in this place, knows it in and out, has all these traps and, different countermeasures in place for his own death so that he cannot die, right? So he is both clever and consistent throughout the entire campaign. And I think that makes one of the best villains in my opinion.
So some of the things when we say like a clever villain, right? So these are, when I say you have the gotcha game, like it's that sudden reveal where, you're creeping through the catacombs and the guy jumps out of the thing and a fight ensues. You have no idea that it's coming. It's kind of thrust upon you. Or there's this idea of like off-screen knowledge, like the bad guy somehow knows what you're doing, or has an idea, or has tabs on what's going on. And these are kind of plot devices that game masters use on what I would consider these clever villains to give them their validity, right? Oh, I am. It falls into that mastermind, right? I kind of know what's happening all the time, and I'm always aware. Also, and for what it's worth, I've played in some games where plot armor has been explicitly used on both characters and villains, but I find the kind of clever villains, you have to give them plot armor, because if they jump out of the woodwork and surprise the guy, and your guys are rolling hot that day, you could be smashing the bad guy well before it's time, right? So you got to give them the easy escape, or the daring to dash away kind of thing. You have to kind of protect him. Where I feel like with Strahd, he knows that you can't challenge him when you get there, and he shows right up,
right?
Invites you to dinner, and puts himself in your face. There's nothing more terrifying than staring at the bad guy at like level 2, knowing that at level 19 or whatever you get to, whatever that story runs to, you're going to be fighting that dude.
Yep.
And it's a long epic saga of how this guy just continues to taunt you and be in your face, and this story kind of just drudges the fear of this encounter the whole time right in your face. And I find that incredibly terrifying. So, all right, chat, what do you think? Obviously Nate feels very strongly about Strahd. Who are some of the scariest bad guys that you've had encountered in your Pathfinder, D&D games, TTRPG games? Obviously, if we don't know, if people know who Strahd is, doesn't really, you don't really need a lot of explanation. But who've been the wickedest bad guys? And give us a little blurb. Tell us about them, right? Because I think sometimes these bad guys get a really bad rap for not giving their just due for how much they impact the plot of the story, or how much they impact the drive or the narrative that's in front of you, right? You can't go to the city of Barovia and interact with Strahd and not feel threatened,
right,
when you come back out, right?
To be fair, when you go to Barovia, you kind of feel threatened about everything, so...
I mean, that's true. That is true. Sunshine,
can't even order a pie without feeling threatened.
Right. Sunshine says Hades. So in the long-running campaign that we played in, that I played for 8 years, kind of the same character, Hades was the big bad guy that we fought. Ultimately, killed the whole party. And we were given some plot armor by the game master at the time, because we were kind of resetting as a group. And so the death was our reset, and we were kind of brought back or saved by the gods and thrown into a different kind of area of the world to rebuild our strength to come back and fight him again. But yes, it was terrifying. The thing that made him horrifying for us was he was always there, but you never knew who he was. You just had this looming idea of the bad guy, and the bad guy wasn't revealed until kind of the end of the campaign. And as we developed this story, my character and Don Martyr's character, we were both playing Drow in D&D 3.5, and we had hatched a plan that in the story that we very early before our traveling with this group started were mind controlled by Hades, and we were used to destroy this town. Well, unbeknownst to us, this town was where one of the other players' hometown was, and we killed his entire family and all this stuff. And so we get to the end of the battle, we show up, he snaps some fingers, bam, all of a sudden we're locked right back into a mind control that we didn't know we even had, and now the whole party that we've been traveling with for 8 years is fighting him and us. So it was kind of wicked. It was definitely a gotcha moment, but it was definitely one of those things that you look back on and you can see the pieces being put in place in front of you, that just like, man, he was always there, and it was always bullshit.
Yep.
Right?
I think, yeah, some of my favorite moments in our home game were more of the homebrew side of it with, I think this was before you joined, but Bill's grandmother was a hag.
Ooh.
Out of his druid forest. And we went and fought her. And then I think this was after you joined. Rayrora's vampire creator, going and fighting him, was sort of one of those gotcha moments where he had mind controlled her and then like pulled her onto his side to fight you all as well. So yeah, I think those were some of my favorite moments actually from our home game.
All right, so talking about the bad guys here, we have Mother Quacker saying that she agrees and she thinks that it often ends up getting convoluted when you try to convey tons of clever details to your players, right? Nothing. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've had game masters try to convey the cleverness of a bad guy, and it just comes off like, you know, you're a third grader that's wet his pants in the hallway.
Yeah, it's either over your head or it doesn't make sense. One of the two.
Yeah, because you don't have all the information that the storyteller does. So when they're relaying that information, you're like, I'm sure this probably makes sense somewhere, but it doesn't make sense to me.
Or you're like Charlie with the red string.
Yes.
Like, you gotta connect all the dots.
Put all the stuff on the board, on the conspiracy theory board.
Yeah.
Wonder Llama says, I think they should be internally consistent, but the best ones have surprises that give them depth. It's not necessarily about being clever, but making you think there's more to them than you thought. Right. So that goes right back to Strahd, right? So when you encounter him, and you know, no spoilers or anything, but when you encounter him the first time, he invites you to dinner, and you walk in with this idea that you are somewhere you don't belong. You feel that very much when you walk in, when you get there, and you meet the head guy in charge, the HMFIC, and he 100% leaves you feeling inadequate, and that he is the be all end all, and that means for you too. Like, he will crush you.
Yep.
Right. Let's see. Mother Quacker again. I think my favorite has been the big bad guy from the Transplaner, the second Stranger season. Tell me about it. What is that about?
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one.
Hyperish says, I haven't met my big bad guy yet in the campaigns, nor my player has met theirs, but I'd say Civil's father is my favorite. Civil's father is my favorite, huh? Well, I don't know that he's kind of a plot point to a story, but I can see how you can definitely look at that and see how your grandfather in story is a bad guy, right?
Yep.
He set a lot of things in motion that ruined a lot of people's lives.
Sunshine says predictability can become boring. I agree with that to some extent. Like, if you know they're going to show up every single battle and just taunt you, then it's like, okay, he's not doing anything right. You've got to spice it up a little bit.
Sure.
Like, oh, he finger of death my colleague, now I gotta go revive him before I go do this next thing, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You can't have a guy that's just constantly there, like poking the wound every time you get into a fight. But it's got to be the right moments, right? You got to have the right moments that he shows up, because I can't stress enough that when we were talking about running Soul Severed and talking to Danielle and being like, hey, we gotta, let's develop this bad guy or this person, and I didn't put any ideas in her head about what she needed or what she wanted, but I was just like, when we can put a face to the name Big Bad Guy, it adds a lot of urgency to what you're doing, right? If you're just willy-nilly running through the world, completing quests, helping people, trying to stop the rift from turning and ripping the world in half, a lot of that feels almost timeless. Like, I can get to it next week, right? But if you got the big bad guy with her or his foot on your throat when it really matters, then everything kind of feels alive and moving.
It also feels more impactful to see that the rift started as this crack and then grew to this huge canyon now going through the continent, and all the other impacts of like Clara being drawn toward the rift, right? And that's obviously very impactful for Chevy. And then, all these other issues that are kind of tied in a way to it, but they're all impacting the world in a very tangible way. So it feels like we've got to solve this as soon as possible to, save the world, essentially, because it is going to end eventually. Like, elves are not being reborn because of, point A to point B.
Right.
It's like things are not happening the way they're supposed to be anymore. So, I think having these tangible consequences to not completing the main quest are very important.
So consistency matters because players need to know what success actually looks like. So players engage more when they know what success looks like. Clarity doesn't remove the player's agency, it focuses the creativity. So let's see if we can do this right here. Go here and then here. Oh, got it.
Got it. First time.
Yes. Okay. So this is an interesting one. So having a player at the table who may look unengaged or detached or unresponsive to roleplay, a lot of times people look at that as a failure on the game master's part for like trying to hook them in, right? Mm-hmm. Or they look at it as like, and again, you're a bad player because you can't focus on what's going on. But I find that both of those are not true, right? I find that when the goals or the consequences haven't been delivered clearly enough, then the things you do don't feel like they matter enough, right? I'll go back and talk about on Bloodlords, we're fighting this hag in the basement of her house, and we thought just slaying the hag in the basement of her house was going to be the end of the story for her. And then all of a sudden, surprise, the big bad guy of that moment is the actual cottage that's trying to kill us, right? And it's not that we ever were given that information up front so we could prepare for that. But what it did was the stakes were very clear. Either we get out of the house or we die, right? There was no alternative. You couldn't just stand there and fight the house. And it became very clear to us at the table that, one, we were grossly not prepared, underprepared for this.
Lysander cannot open a window.
I cannot open a window, and I'm literally being chewed by fireplaces as we speak. But it became very clear very quickly that we only had one objective, and it was to get out of the house, right? And it made it very clear what we were trying to do. And so from that point, if you go back and you watch those episodes, you can kind of see everybody's brain click on, and everybody kind of leaned in, and the whole show changed at that moment because it was like, oh shit, I have an objective, and it's to ultimately save my life, but if I can save their life too, that'd be great, but I need to get the hell out of this house. And it was very clear what the failure condition was. I can't begin to tell you how stressful it had to have been for Bess and Alara, just like trying to keep Mert, grabbing him and dragging him up the stairs every turn, just waiting for her opportunity to drag him out the door. But I don't think I could have been not engaged in that moment because my character's life was literally on the line, and it really comes down to like if the dice want you to live or if the dice don't want you to live in those moments, right? So this whole idea of players engage more when they know what success looks like. This applies to combat. Like if you know what success looks like in combat, then you're going to be engaged, right? I can't, fighting the Etten Morg, down in the basement. We had one goal: kill that thing so it doesn't kill us. It almost got us.
Yep.
Right? It almost got us. Social scenes, like if you know what success looks like, talking, convincing the faction to support you, or you know, or even just convincing the faction to distrust or, you know, find holes in their loyalties to other people. It kind of goes like this. So in combat, instead of saying let's just kill everything, say something like survive 5 rounds, right? Or in social combat or social encounters, instead of saying like just go convince the council, say something like make them doubt their leader. It kind of narrows down what you're doing. In campaign arcs, you know, instead of saying, you know, your general, hey, stop the cult, say something like prevent the ritual before the eclipse. Having that clarity doesn't remove the agency of the player.
Sure.
It makes it clear on your decisions as a player.
Yeah, so to some extent, it's the GM's job to sometimes spoon feed some information to the players, especially if they're not picking up on like the nuances that you're laying down. But to some degree, it's also up to the players to define what success is, because in a moment, in a heavy role-playing game especially, success may be different to each player. And if you're working as a team to do something, which I think I see a lot on Bloodlords, you guys, you know, Mert and Amon, you know, talking about like, we've got to do this. Well, I want to do this. Well, let's, you know, you guys come to an agreement on what you're going to do, and you define what success is for your team, right?
Right.
So it's not always Patrick laying out, this is what you've got to do in this moment. It's you guys coming together. It's like, well, we've got to get rid of a Bloodlord, and then we've got to stand behind one of us to be that Bloodlord in the future, right?
Right.
So I think you guys do a really good job at that, and I think that's I think that's really like how you engage is like ultimately you define what that success is, whether it's you as a team or the GM flat out telling you this is what you've got to do in this moment. That clarity is really what defines the moment. It's not necessarily like you said, it's not taking away from their creativity or anything, but I do tend to lean toward let the players decide what that success is first, let them kind of figure it out, and then if they're not coming up with anything, then kind of spoon feed a little bit after that.
I do want to read what Mother Quacker says here. So this is very interesting and so true. She says, while we don't have direct statistics, we know that there is a decent percentage of players with ADHD or other interesting neurotypes. Sometimes it's more about simple accommodations.
Sure.
Right? So what, I mean, it could go back to just the spoon feeding, right? Just the, hey, they're not getting it or whatever. Yep. But I'm very interested, Mother Quacker, like what kind of accommodations would help someone in that instance to let them know what success looks like, even if it's even if you're struggling as a player to develop what success looks like, right? Because sometimes that's incredibly difficult to figure out. I mean, hell, I'm me on the best days, and I can't define what success looks like for me, but you want me to sit here on a Monday and Tuesday night with a whole different set of hats on, or elf ears on, and define success for a guy that doesn't even exist. Yep. Sometimes that's incredibly difficult.
Yep.
So
and that's also like that's also a good skill for the GM to have, and I think Don has been a GM that I've seen do this really well. Having accommodations for different players. That game that I was in of his had grown to, at one time we had like 13 people around. It was like on the busiest night, but that was like a lot of people floating in and floating out at random times. Most weeks it was like 8, which is still a pretty large game.
Right.
But yeah, it had grown quite a large game. To some extent, it is the GM's responsibility to make sure that everyone feels included and accommodated, and it helps to know those sorts of things. Like, well, Haley has ADHD, so I know that I have to be engaging to a certain degree to her with the way that I do things, and I'm pretty sure that other people at our table have ADHD as well that I have to accommodate for. So there are certain ways that you have to accommodate for different neurotypes. I've also GM'd for kids, my kids specifically, and other groups of people that have different skill sets that you have to gear the game to that audience, right? So you could run the same game for 3 different groups of people and it would run completely differently based on who those people are, right?
Right.
So yeah, to some degree it is the GM's job to either spoon feed that information to help them define what success is, or allow them to be creative enough to define what success is for themselves if that's the path that they choose to go down. So.
And ironically enough, I think it goes back to what we talked about at the very first point, right, where the GM kind of sets the ceiling of like, we can be this,
right,
and then it's how can I help you as a facilitator take you from here to there, right? So Mother Quacker says, I'll just give some examples with my Neuro Spicy crew. Not playing at a table, letting people stand or walk around as needed, allowing fidgets.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would be.
That was a big one for the kids actually, because they all have ADHD, and them having like something to fidget with, or most of the time as a GM, I wouldn't allow phones at the table just to like looking at your phone for and not paying attention. But given that they were kids and have ADHD, I know that helps them pay attention to you're paying attention to 2 things at once. You're splitting that off, but at the same time it kind of helps you pay attention more to the thing that you're listening to, right? So
yeah, so Kayla, my wife, she will actually, like, when we go to church or if we do other things, she will crochet, which will occupy like her hands and part of her mind, which will allow her to focus on some of the other things. So, I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. This idea of being able to occupy or quiet some part of you so you can focus on other parts.
Yep. She
right?
just said that in chat.
Look at you. Look at you.
Also have a coloring app on my tablet.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
And I've there's a bunch of us that will partake in that for sure.
Yep.
So there's a thing, if success needs to be clear, right? So if you need to be clear to be able to identify what success is, I think at the same time, so does your commitments. Let's see if this is right.
Ooh, look at that.
Look at that go. Okay, so this says, scheduling is a table skill, not an out-of-game chore. Reliability builds trust. Trust builds campaigns. Let's see.
All right.
We're getting it.
You're a pro.
We're getting it.
Yeah, so I personally have not had an issue with scheduling. I think we do a great job at our home game. Obviously, Mondays and Tuesday nights, we know that we're here every Monday or Tuesday night if we're in a game.
Right.
Or, if something happens, it's really easy to hop on Discord and say, hey guys, I've got jury duty, or, whatever the excuse is, or, if there's not an excuse and you just don't want to be here because you hate us, that's okay too, Jess. But yeah, I've personally not really had a problem with scheduling. So this one kind of took me by surprise, because I don't think of it as either a table skill or an out-of-game chore. It's just something that's like, hey, if you want to play, we've got to schedule this, right? So at the end of every session for our home game, for example, we pop out our phones and say, what's next month look like for you guys? Oh, okay, the 3rd Saturday is great. Cool, we'll do it there. It's a quick 5-minute ordeal and then it's over with. So it's not like a whole, you have to do a doodle and figure out what everyone's schedules is or anything. It's like, just figure out what works best for the most people, and if someone can't make it, then sorry.
So there I saw an interesting quote as I was going through this, and it said, scheduling isn't logistics, it's a culture. Right? So Nate was talking about, like, at the end of his games, we kind of all pull our phone out, we all schedule the next session, right? the idea of, scheduling is a skill, a table skill, not an out of game chore, is exactly what you're saying, right? Sure. So it's something you do while you're in the setting, because ultimately that game is a priority, at least to those that are playing in the game master, and you want it to feel like a priority. And if you all pack all your stuff up and grab all your stuff and scurry away, and then 3 days later it's, okay guys, when do we want to play next?
Yeah.
Then starts the banter of, okay, well, I can't do this and I can't do that and this isn't there, which is kind of what leads to that, like, it's a chore. It is a skill.
Yeah.
Like, to be able to handle that and negotiate, we play with 6 people at the table plus a game master. Obviously ours is a little different because we have a kind of a concrete schedule, but when you start talking about those once a month games or stuff like that, it's just long enough for people to forget, and it's just long enough for things to change in the distance.
Yep.
For it to become a problem.
Yep.
It's not steady enough for you to be like, okay, every Sunday I can't do anything else because I'm playing D&D, which is kind of the luxury that we have here. Is you just kind of say, okay, every Monday, unless there's 10 feet of snow on the ground, we're going to have Bloodlords, right. And every Tuesday we're going to have Soul Severed here on Elite Encounters. But and that's the consistency. It's just, I've played in consistent games, and you get the best games out of things that are consistent. Right? It's kind of how that works. It's kind of interesting. The differences between the tables that you run into, right? It always turns into like the table that will figure it out later. They'll cancel repeatedly. It's always, I'm sorry, I can't be here for whatever reason, and it's always the excuse, right? Of course, we want to talk a little empathy right here, right? Because life does happen, right?
People get sick.
People get sick. People have jury duty. People just hate us for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
we understand.
Yes.
But and I think I just said it. Reliability will build trust, and trust will build the story, right? So I think and all of you in chat, if you aren't playing in like a weekly game where you have the luxury of like, oh, every Monday or every Tuesday, what are some of the complications you run into when scheduling, right? If you just look online on all the forums on
every joke about D&D is that scheduling is the BBEG, right?
Yeah.
Like, and like I said, I've never really had that much of a problem with it. So maybe it is a skill, and I just have that skill. I don't know. But yeah, like you said, if you make it your priority to schedule the game, then it does not become a chore, right? So, yeah, what do you guys in chat think?
Have you run into those issues where you maybe you're playing an at-home game and it starts off hot and heavy, and you're playing like 3 days a week, and then it just kind of, as everyone's schedules kind of filter back in, it kind of slows down and diminishes, and then eventually you have Jinx clamoring that he can't play his at-home game, and Jenny yelling at him.
Another Quacker says, scheduling session to session is a nightmare. The only games I've been a part of that lasted for any length had a consistent schedule, and the GM was okay letting people who didn't prioritize it fade out. That's also true. Yeah, if people aren't prioritizing the game, then they're not contributing to the success of that game, right? So
correct.
It's okay to let them leave willingly, or it is your job as a GM to make sure that your table is successful. So at some point you do have to make those tough decisions for the players that are not cutting it, right? So you have to either have those hard discussions of like, look, I'd love to have you in this game, but you've got to prioritize it if you want to be a part of it. If not, then sorry, no hard feelings, but I'd rather just play with these people that are prioritizing it, right? So Jinx wants to be Jinx. Okay.
Well, I mean, I understand, buddy. What's up, Joseph? Thanks for dropping in, man.
Yep.
I appreciate you.
First and fourth Saturday, Monday, and Tuesday.
Okay.
That's a lot of gaming, Sunshine.
We're gonna move on. Let's see what we got here. Nate, you want to read that one?
GM's job isn't to entertain. Oh, sorry. Let's go back up here. This is spicy spice, not medium spice anymore.
Yeah, we've upgraded.
We're up to spicy spice now. This is my second favorite Spice Girl. The GM's job isn't to entertain, it's to facilitate meaningful choices. Roleplay thrives on decisions, not performances.
Ooh.
So I think this ties in well to what I was saying before, in that it's the GM's job to facilitate. And so I totally agree with this one. When I GM, I'm not, I'm building a scene, building an encounter, building a world for the players to have fun in. I'm not there to do everything and to, be the funny voice and, do everything that's entertaining. You guys can banter amongst yourselves. You guys can decide, who you want to fight and who you want to steal from and, whatever. It's my job to facilitate all that so that you guys can have as much fun as possible. And it's fun for me to do that. So that's why I'm in it. So this one I 100% agree with, is that I'm not necessarily there to just entertain everybody. I'm there to facilitate your fun, and that in itself is going to be fun for me because I can jump in on those experiences.
Right. I know we have some topics a little later that we'll get to, but how much has Critical Role, Glass Cannon, Dimension 20, all of these streaming shows that do kind of what we do, how much have they impacted what you feel is the expectation? Some would call it the Mercer effect,
Yeah.
or the Brennan Lee Mulligan effect now. How much would you say that they have impacted on the expectation of a game master when you have people come to the table that are expecting Matt Mercer or the Brennan Lee Mulligans or the Abria Iyengar and all those, all those
excellent,
that are
thespians that are,
paid to do this,
paid to entertain.
Yes.
Or have, done this in the past as voice actors or, whatever they do. That I've not experienced that personally. But I know I've seen a ton of stories online with people like trying to find players or, players trying to find DMs, but they're just not, they don't do the funny voice. They didn't put 3 Pumat souls in there and voice all 3 of them because they're all clones of each other. And it's like, so what? You're there to have fun. Like the game, some DMs don't like to do funny voices. Some DMs don't like to do social encounters. Some players don't like to do social encounters. So again, I go back to the point of it's the DM's job to facilitate what the table wants and what the table is going to have the most fun doing. And sometimes it takes a few sessions to figure that out. But ultimately, a good GM will be able to feel their way through what the players like to do the most, and then facilitate that and turn that into, this is our monthly fun. This is our weekly fun.
Right.
What we're going to do.
Yep. And it kind of goes back, and I have a little quote in here. It kind of goes back to almost exactly what you said. A good game master doesn't ask, are my players entertained? They ask, did their choices matter? Mm-hmm. Right? Because ultimately you're just trying to facilitate this blank canvas that you let them make choices, and then you react, and then they react, and then you react, and they react. In that collaborative storytelling kind of environment. So what we're gonna ask in chat here. So what are some of the most meaningful decisions or choices that you've made in game? Or have you ever felt pressured that you had to perform as a game master?
I'm looking up something really quick because something just came to mind. A book series. I have to get the author's name. Keith Ammon. So this is a book series that I've read. He's written The Monsters Know What They're Doing, and then there's a sequel called More, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, and then there's another one called I'm not finding it now. I know he's written the third one, Live to Tell the Tale. That's the third one. These all revolve around how to run your monsters, and what you just said about the table reacting, DM reacting back and forth. In one of those books, I think it was Live to Tell the Tale. It may have been another book entirely. By the way, I'm a big nerd and I read a bunch of books on like how to DM things and watch a bunch of YouTube videos on like how to properly DM and like be fun for a table. That's what I like to do in my spare time. So, yeah, big nerd here. Anyways, so in one of these books, it may have not been any of those. It may have been another one. I'll find it later. But
we'll drop it in the Discord, and if you're in the Discord, you can check it out.
Yeah. One of these books that I've read talked about the whole action reaction thing, and what this author found to be the most fun for his table, and it probably applies to multiple tables. I haven't tried it yet, but basically at the beginning of the campaign, session 0, you sit down with your players, and if you're doing like let's say a whole homebrew world, you sit down with those players, and they each write down what 3 goals for that player. So every player has 3 goals, and the DM can take those goals and kind of mesh them together into the campaign. So that way the campaign is centered around the goals of the player. So it's no longer action reaction, it's you guys are driving this. You guys defined what your goals are up front. I'm building a scene to allow you to do that. I'm building a world to allow you to do that. So there's no more action reaction, really. It's the players are driving their own train, and the tracks can go wherever.
That's interesting.
So I've liked that aspect and liked that concept, and I've really wanted to apply that to some of my games.
Sorry. So I know for me, talking about meaningful choices, right? It's always so Jinx says, and I'll get to mine in a second, but Jinx says one of the most memorable choices for me was probably a drow that I once played. He didn't have to or need to, but there was a matron of a house that he chose to bow to and dedicated himself to. That's interesting. Yeah, some of those choices that you make in game completely alter the entire, path of your character. Those are the fun things that you look back on and you're just like, oh man, at that point I decided I was doing X, Y, and Z, and it changed the entire trajectory of my character. Right?
Yep.
I look back at the session that we did when Patrick wasn't here on Bloodlords, and if you haven't seen it, go check it out. We did a whole session without a game master. It was between books 2 and 3 on Bloodlords, and we kind of did a just kind of a check-in on everybody. We had some downtime and kind of got this little bit of freedom just to kind of what would your character do if you had 3 weeks of downtime. Mm-hmm. And one of the most meaningful choices that I made at that time was I developed a spell that allows me to essentially stabilize undead, which, if you're familiar with Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the Bloodlords Adventure Path, there's only 2 spells in the existence of Pathfinder and what we use that are available to us that we can heal undead with. You have Soothe and you have Harm. And there's no way to stabilize undead. So if you go down and start making death saves, if you can't get healed or have Soothe dropped on you, or you make those death saves, you're in the ticking clock of doom. But narratively, it made sense for Lysander to develop this stabilize, and he calls it Bind Remains. So essentially, he just locks you to this world and stops you from disintegrating as an undead. Now, in the game, we haven't had a chance to really use it, but I think narratively, it made a ton of sense, and it's going to be super critical, like kind of where he goes moving forward. And though a lot of people don't see it yet, but it's one of those things that's a stepping stone to other bigger and badder things. So, we got a Wonder Llama says the GM's job is to make the world feel like something the group wants to engage in. I agree that meaningful choices overall is overall more important than entertaining, but it's just not always the same. Sometimes it's the DM's job to lay down a lot of exposition without choices. Sometimes it's to act, sometimes it's to entertain. But yeah, before long, it will always be to present choice. I can read, I promise. Yeah. It will. Stay in school, folks. What do you say? Stay in school?
Stay in school, folks. Yeah.
It will always be to present choices, or it wouldn't be a game. by the way, that goes both ways. The players have multiple shifting responsibilities as well. Yeah, absolutely. Like, if you look back at the breakdown of the of the first 4 things that we talked about, a lot of that is about like GM responsibility, player responsibility, table responsibility. You can kind of look at all that and say, you can't have a collective, collaborative storytelling game if not everybody is carrying their weight. Right? Because if Nate is telling the story and he's the only one doing all the exposition and all the storytelling and all the interaction, then really we're just listening to Nate, read an audiobook with some crazy characters throwing some dice to interrupt him.
I like those moments in Bloodlords where you have like, for example, Lysander, or Ophelia like playing in the basement, or like, you guys driving those role play moments where it's like that takes the pressure off of Patrick for one, but then 2, it's also helping build the world around you, right? So because this is not just a GM run world, it's the table's world, and you're all in it and you can all interact with it and build upon it,
right?
So those are the kinds of moments that I really enjoy. The book that I was looking for was Justin Alexander's So You Want to Be a Game Master, by the way. So if anyone wants to check that out, highly recommend. It's a good read.
That's fun. So you want to be a game master.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to move on. And we got here... this one hits really close to home because I have talked about this and talked about this and talked about this and talked about this. This could have very easily landed on the realm of super spicy, depending on your game master and your story that you play. But random encounters are only boring when they don't actually change anything. Impact matters more than who rolls initiative.
Yep, I agree with this to some extent. The part that I disagree with here is that you got to keep in mind above table, right? This is still a game that we're all playing.
Oh, yep.
Right. And yes, it is important that we're what was it? Impact matters more than who rolls initiative. Yes. So there are those that are looking for, or moments that we're looking for impact. There's also moments where you've got to relieve tension to some degree. So random encounters sometimes can work as that sort of interlude where it's like, this doesn't really matter. You don't have to think about it. This acts as a break, right, in the moment. And it can be a quick, 20-minute battle, right? And that gives you a break before you get on to the, you're climbing a mountain to get to, Strahd's castle or Count Rodar's castle, whatever. There's some wolves on the way. You got to fight these wolves. You're level 13. You can handle some wolves, but that sets you up for like, this guy's sending wolves after me, maybe, or maybe they're just random wolves. I don't know. I can handle this, but that's just preparing me for what's to come ahead. Or it's a nice little, okay, we're traveling and there is danger along the way that lets you know there's something along the way. So I'm a big proponent of not rolling random encounters. For the most part, they're more pre-planned random encounters. Like, I'll roll some things and figure out what to do randomly, but for the most part, they're pre-planned. But I do see instances where it's like, okay, we're traveling on the sea for 2 weeks. Let's roll some dice and see if something happens, right? So to me, there's a little bit of give and take here.
Sure. I think this is one of those in one of those stances where I'm very one way, right? To me, I would rather narratively develop story by role-playing together than to have a combat that feels like it changes nothing in the narrative. So like, even if you go to the extent of saying, okay, you're throwing the random combat in there because you want us to use some resources up before we fight the next thing. Okay. But I feel like if you're going that route, then you have the wolves, right? You have the wolves that are thrown out by the bad guy to try and either slow you down, or maybe there's they're using a scrying eye to watch how you fight so they can learn some information or gather some information or something like that. That narratively makes sense. And if you come back through the battle, you fight the bad guy, you find his scrying eye and it was looking at the field where you fought the wolves. Okay, now all of a sudden that wolf battle makes a whole lot of sense because it was, you were being watched. But I feel like an encounter that changes nothing, you might as well just not even have it, right? If you're just out on the open sea and you're going to decide to throw some dice to see if you fight, a kraken because he's there, what do you gain at the end other than like some narrative XP and if you do XP, or just a fight in the combat or in the session or whatever? I would much rather narratively develop the story than roll dice in a combat that I feel is disconnected or only thrown in because we have to fight or we should fight, right? And I think that people get trapped on this idea of what a random encounter is as well, right? It's not always bandits that rush out and fight you in the woods. You have environmental effects. Maybe you're walking from point A to point B and somewhere in between there's a snowstorm and it delays you for 3 weeks or something. Yep. That's also a random encounter that is narratively will change how the world replies or responds around you. So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about random encounters, because I'm pretty polar on random encounters. I feel like unless they narratively make sense, a lot of the times I would just rather do without them. I would just rather talk it through. Well, yeah, Jinx, of course sometimes you want to just stab things, right? And coming from playing with people that sometimes that's really all you're after. And I think it goes back to the game master, right? You got to know your audience, or your table. And if your guys are just there because they want to smash shit, then they're no longer random encounters anymore, right?
They're pre-planned.
Yeah, they're narrative expression of what your players want to do. And I think that's where the change happens. If you have a table that would rather sit around and develop long drawn out stories and role play, and you just decide while they're at the bar one day to have a bar fight because, well, why not? Okay, well, narratively make it make sense, or I would just rather sit and drink my beer and develop my story. Right?
Yeah, that's going back to the players in my home game. I think you're the standout of like the one person that wants to do more role play type of things. So you and I can just have our 1 hour of talking back and forth while everybody else fights stuff.
That's right. I'll be there in a minute. Yeah. I got to talk to this. Talk to this guy.
But yeah, for the most part, like you said, that there's a kraken at sea. To some degree, pulling the veil back, right? Like as a GM, I have to facilitate 4 hours worth of fun for everybody, and I know fighting the dragon in this one dungeon is not going to take that full 4 hours. So I've got to develop things like as you're getting there, something's got to eat up that time, right? Because I'm not going to go develop the next 3 dungeons out for you guys to boom, 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 do 3 dragons in a row, right? So to some degree, like you said, it depends on who your table is, who are your players, what are they looking for. I've never really been one to just like roll dice in the moment to see, some bandits show up, but I will throw in like, okay, while you're traveling here, there's this is a good example of one that was actually skipped, I think before you showed up. Everyone was on their way from Baldur's Gate to where you were going to basically get into Avernus. On the way, there was a windmill or a sawmill or something that had been taken over by some bandits, and you have to cross over the bridge to get there, to get to the city or whatever. Players at the time just chose, I'm going to ignore this, let them do their business. I had planned out this whole thing like, yep, they're going to, if they need to, they can interact with everybody here. They can, free the sawmill and give it back to the people. At the time, they were like, we got to get to Avernus. I don't have time to deal with the petty bullshit. Like, let the bandits have the sawmill for now. If in the future we come back, we can deal with it. But right now, I got to go. So they chose to pay the toll. They paid the bandits. They walked on, knowing that like the bandits had this sawmill. So that was one thing that was like, okay, you know, I've developed something as it was again early on in the campaign. Of early on, it's like, okay, this could be a role playing moment, or it could be a battle if they choose to do that. But they chose instead to skip it entirely, and that's perfectly fine. I can reuse the the fights in other places. Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
You're okay.
Yep.
You've kind of, whether you meant to do it or not, you kind of tied it into the next one.
Oh, okay.
Random encounters and things like that, they really only work if the world isn't kind of sitting around and waiting politely for the party to show up, right? So
totally meant to tie it in.
I know it's so good. If players don't care about the world, it's because it doesn't react to them, right? Investment grows when the world pushes back. So this is an interesting one as well. They're all interesting, right? I say that, but let's use your sawmill, right? So I'm not saying they didn't care about the world you'd put them in.
They cared more about the main objective.
They cared more about the main objective, but I think some players, when you put them in a world like that, they expect, okay, I'm going to take a right here and I'm going to totally ignore this thing, and then when I come back 5 levels later, it's still going to be just those bandits in that sawmill, and I'll just smash them and then give it back to the city, right? Well, if the world doesn't react to their choices, then why are they given the freedom to make choices? So in this particular example, if they show up 5 levels later, and now the bandits have had a stronghold in that sawmill,
they might have a dragon now,
and now they've taken the grain mill and the windmill, and they're starting to starve out the town. And now when they show back up, your party sees the first-hand results of their choice, and it's like, oh crap, and then you have people in the town talking about, oh, this was just a little fledgling bandit group that took the sawmill, and they could have been stopped when they were so small, but now here they are, months, years later, running that whole thing. And I think you would get some eyes popped, in your players when you're like, oh, shit, I think we probably fucked up right there. We've made a terrible mistake.
So you guys don't know it, but spoilers, the big bad that you just fought and that you are now fighting only came about because of decisions that were made within Avernus. And I, developed the storyline around like what was left in Avernus that you guys just didn't even touch on. So there were things that you could have done in Avernus that would have avoided this whole ordeal that is taking you to level 20, and I would have come up with something else, right?
Sure.
But, it's part of that the world reacts to you, and the universe reacts to your decisions, and that like, because you didn't do certain things in there, that left Archon able to, come back to the material realm and then free Tiamat, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
So, some of these things, right? So if you've ever played in a game where like the NPC doesn't remember your character, like how disconnected do you feel, right? Because I know for me, I have a habit of growing very connected to NPCs, and I will like latch on to certain NPCs, and I'll just like hold them,
Hostage.
What?
Hostage.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it helps when you're a vampire and you can just make them follow you for eternity. And it's disconcerting when you come back to a town that maybe you've been in 2 or 3 or 4 times, especially if you're trying to play, the heroes and kind of have the hero idea or reputation, and you come back and you aren't remembered, or you aren't treated as though you're remembered, right? Or when you make choices, they don't really have that ripple effect. You go back to the sawmill, right? They made a choice to go and just pay the toll and move on about their business. If that never ripples out to a bigger effect, then that choice meant nothing. And that, 40 gold or whatever it was they paid at the time, who cares?
Right. Sunshine says there are things in Soul Severed that will come back to bite us.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure there will be.
I'm sure there will be. Jeez, oh Pete. Yeah.
We left Kira in Meadowrun.
Yep. Sure did. Success and failure, they feel the same, right? Yep. So if their choice doesn't matter, then what is success, what is failure, other than, I may lose my character or I may whatever, right?
Right.
There's no long-term effects to your choices.
Right.
Ultimately, that just kind of boils down to that as a table, kind of holding everyone accountable, right? As a table or as a game master to a table, reaction teaches players what matters. If the world reacts to their decisions matter. And then the player will be locked on to, okay, if I make this decision, what's going to happen to the world, right? It's kind of that butterfly effect, but in the now.
Yep. This goes hand in hand with it wasn't the previous one of the previous topics of defining what success is, because that also inherently defines what failure is. And I think at a table, it is necessary to have a chance of failure in order to feel real. I'm a very big proponent of, you guys make the choices, you guys drive what is success, but there is a chance of failure. There's a real chance of death for both the players and the characters, because I will take you out back. No.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, the characters definitely should be able to feel that fear of failure and like what's going to happen if I make this choice. If it doesn't work out, how's the world going to react? Am I going to die? Is Chevy going to die in this moment? If we don't stop the ghost ship, are they going to take over Barathel? Like, what's going to happen? So yeah, there's got to be that fear of failure.
So, Mother Quacker, I'm interested. So, you said that this kind of choosing the faction or having making a choice and have the world kind of react to you, it's the part of the Bloodlord that scares you the second most, right? I won't ask for what scares you the absolute most, because that may be spoilery, but why does that scare you? Is it the finality of like, oh, we have to choose kind of someone we're going with, and then we start kind of alienating everyone else? Or is it the repercussions of not choosing said faction and the consequences of that, right? It's probably, I guess, maybe a little bit of both. I know as a player playing Lysander, the choice isn't, he's not afraid of the choice of choosing someone to kind of be like the benefactor or the faction that you kind of get in league with. I think as a player, I'm looking at what is the smallest stone I can throw that's going to create the biggest ripple. And it turns into, what choice am I going to make now is going to turn into a country affecting choice later, right? So I go back to when we were in Sallow Shore, and I convinced those people to stand against Sani. We cleared the temple. I then turned around and essentially convinced them to reconsecrate the temple and start to rebuild this whole ordeal. To Lysander, that was nothing. To just talk to them and convince them to, refine their faith. But I have in my mind this idea of what that turns into, and what Sallow Shore will be in the future of the game. And it may be nothing. We may never go back there as far as like the AP, but Lysander will go back there, right? I threw the smallest stone and made the largest ripple so far in that moment right there. Yep. And so for me, it's like just standing on a hill and looking down on that and being like, oh yeah, that whole city is now affected by what I did or what we did as a group.
Yep.
And that has me like locked. And it could be the dumbest, end of book 12 or however many books there are. In my, wrap up, it's going to be Lysander goes back to Sallow Shore and finds out what happens to that temple and sees where everything lands and how everything comes together. Like, it's on my, it's on my board.
Yep. It's similar to what we did in Orvast, and with Chevy, riling up 2 whole towns essentially before leaving and saying, we're gonna kill this emperor, and then several even saying, I'll kill this king before it's said and done, right? So yeah, it's like the stone.
Spoiler, I have a name for that.
You have a name for what?
That whole thing.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's called the Baker's Rebellion.
Oh, okay. Started with the baker, yeah. Yeah, it's like you said, this
may or may not be in development.
All right, that could be a fun one shot kind of thing.
Maybe a fun 2-shot here in the near future.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, it's like the stone that kind of starts the avalanche. It's like that was kind of Chevy's whole ordeal in that mindset in that moment was like, I want to be the front of the the riot that builds into the militia that builds into eventually the army that takes down the kingdom.
Right.
So yeah, I think those types of things are fun in that, like, that's then the world reacting to the things that we do.
What we can talk very quickly about as a player when you're making your character. Even in some like adventure paths where the stuff is very laid out for you and you have very set places and things like that. What does it mean as a player when you're making a character, developing a backstory, and you're just kind of given a blank slate to just kind of put your fingerprint on something? Because I developed a story for Lysander, and he's from the mega metropolis of Mekatar and Bloodlords, but in the instance of that city, I've kind of made a home and a place and a family and a story and this whole thing out of what may or obviously that doesn't exist in the AP. You did something very similar, and we're there right now. We're in Marathel. Marathel didn't exist in Danielle's world. Even into the future, as we played in the future timelines, Marathel was never a city that we ever talked about, went to, heard about, nothing. And it only existed or exists because Chevy exists and Nate put Marathel on the map.
Yep.
Right? How cool is that to be able to have the world physically, literally be like, oh, we need a town here, we need a city here for this guy to be from, for his whole backstory to make sense. Boom, here we are.
Yep.
Right? You changed a whole Dwarven city's opinion of other races, huh? Oh, geez. Mother Quacker, yeah, I completely understand that. I feel like every time that we are faced with a decision in Bloodlords, I might as well just close my eyes and throw a dart, because I don't have any information. Literally, it's like I know nothing, or I feel like I know nothing. And maybe that's the way it was meant to be, or the way it's supposed to be set up at this point. But we're asked to make very critical decisions, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I like that this question is worded as if the players don't care about the worlds because it doesn't react to them, because it means not only the characters but the players themselves too, because what you were saying about Chevy is that, like, the world itself reacted to me coming into the game as a new player, right? The world changed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is important to make people feel included. Like, I didn't have to go ask Danielle what city exists here, like is there a sea god that I can worship? She just basically picked anything, and I said, if this doesn't make sense in your world, feel free to change it, but like, this is what I've got.
Yeah.
So it definitely makes people feel more included and want to contribute.
And so, just for context, right? So when we sat down and when we started Soul Severed way back in the day, the city of Dromathan was actually a city that existed in her world previously, but it was largely undeveloped. It was just like this mega metropolis city that was, split by the rift and all this kind of stuff. And when we sat down to like kind of do session zeros and kind of get this idea of putting this campaign together, as a series of players, we were given a task to develop parts of the city. So there are parts of the city that have been developed by players that may or may not even be at the table anymore, but there are parts of the city that never existed before and now exist because the player put their hand on it, and this whole city is now grown and changed, right? So super cool when you have a game master that allows you to do those things. And it goes right back to even what Patrick does in a pre-written adventure path. He gives you the autonomy to go out and put your fingerprint on the world as a player, as a character, and make it feel like you've always lived here or you've had that impact on this place. So important as a character and a player to get that kind of buy-in from the story and the game master.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so we're gonna move on. Unless you got anything else?
No, I was just bantering the subject.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, she said that she changed the all the dwarves' opinions of other races, and I said, well, I killed 3 people with a message spell.
Okay. Check that out.
Player agency doesn't mean the world waits for permission. Urgency drives choice. Stasis kills investment. Yeah, so this is one that I kind of thought about a little bit. So to me, player agency is like, when I think of player agency, I think of, or disrupting player agency rather, I think of like DM using a command spell or something on a player, and this is my character now, I'm running it. Like, that you just take away all choice, all player agency from that player. To me, that's a big no-no, unless it's a very like small roleplay moment, like a very quick roleplay moment. It's like, okay, Count Rodar has taken control of Rayrora for this battle.
Mm-hmm.
What are you gonna do? And then like, ultimately the magic's dispelled and she can fight back now. It's like, okay, cool, you figured something out, or there's got to be a way to to fix that. To me, the world waiting for permission part is very true here, in that like for the world to react to what the players are doing in a sensible manner doesn't necessarily mean that the players have any say over what the world does, right? Like, if they're going to make choices, other factions and the BEG, whoever, are going to make other choices, and those will directly conflict with what the players are doing.
Yep.
The world oftentimes is not fair in real life and in the game, and it will conflict with what you want it to be. And I think that's what makes a game great, in that there has to be conflict in order for there to be resolution. So the world does not wait for permission. I don't think that necessarily negates player agency, though. I think that is what drives player agency, and it makes it so that the players are agents of themselves to make the choices that they want to make in order to drive change in the world, right?
Right. I think this statement here kind of just leans on the idea that the game exists in a spotlight, right? And the only thing that moves in the world is where the heroes are and the spotlight goes. And that's this idea of like this player agency, as in like the world only moves when we're there, or I say it moves, or I describe how the world moves, right? And some people will take this idea and turn it into this almost like this altruistic kind of veto power of like, well, that's not how my character would react, or this is how my character would react to this, and kind of use that as like a cornerstone of law of, oh, well, I would never fall for a command spell as a character because my will is too high for whatever this is. Brother, you're rolling dice just like everybody else.
Yep.
Right? And it goes right back to your sawmill idea, right? If you don't advance that story, then you essentially are proving that the idea is the world only moves when the players move. Right? And the spotlight only exists on the heroes, and that's the only story you're willing to tell. And the world is moving with or without you, and that's what makes all of the stuff you do urgent, or have pressure, or have like this kind of that pressure behind your eyes, this tension that exists. Because sure, we could take 3 weeks off in Bloodlords and sit around and do whatever. Do I think we're going to live? Probably not, because we have the spy master that's knocking on our door telling us we have to do something. And if we just decided at the moment to be like, sorry, pal, we're not interested, take your writ from the king and move on, I don't think it would go over very well, right? So there's just this idea, as a game master and as a player, you have to expect that the world moves independently of you.
You can tell Romeo and Juliet from only Romeo's perspective, but or am I thinking about this backwards? When he eventually shows up to the tomb, Juliet will still have poisoned herself or put herself to sleep. I might have those two backwards. Either way, like, the story progresses from both sides, whether you only spotlight one or the other.
Right.
I think Abria Iyengar actually does a really good job at when she DMs games, putting spotlight on things that you wouldn't normally put a spotlight on, of the world moving and progressing despite the players. She'll say something like, okay, you rolled a perception check and you only got a 13. Great. What you don't see, she'll put it in those words, what you don't see is the tripwire that you just stepped on, or something like that.
Right.
So, and I think she does a really good job of that I don't see other DMs doing quite as often. But I like that, in that there's more perspective thrown in, that, like, okay, we as players above the table can learn about what's going on, and giving spotlight to things that are moving despite what we're doing, or because of what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when you talk about those things. I played in a campaign one time that very literally had like a clock, like a timeline in the campaign, and you would progress through the story, and based on how long it would take you from getting from point A to point B to point C to point D or whatever, there was a clock essentially above you that you obviously didn't see or didn't know about, that the bad guys were doing other things, and the cult or whatever is moving on without you. So if you fucked around for 3 weeks because you wanted to grow some corn and sell it on whatever, the bad guys are still moving. And it just kind of,
those armies in Orvast are still charging their way toward Dromathan. Right. So despite what we're doing, there's still a looming threat there.
Right. And that's always interesting, because it's easy to look at the story in the spotlight and be like, oh, this is what matters.
Right.
When you take the step back and you put the light on everybody, you're like, oh,
yeah.
Every time that I sleep and wake up, everybody else sleeps and wakes up and starts their day and does whatever they're going to do.
Yep.
So interesting. I think we're down here. Pow.
Super spicy now.
Super spicy.
Super spice. This is Supergirl's spice persona.
Yep.
Super spice. So the hobby's obsession with fun has made people allergic to tension. Great sessions can still be challenging. I think this goes back to what I was saying about it's important to have the ability to fail, and like things aren't just handed to you like we're going to succeed. Defining what success and ultimately what failure looks like. To me, I think part of the fun is the tension. It's that, like, if you're not getting invested into the story or invested into what's happening and where you feel feelings at the table, then that to me is not fun. Like I come to the table expecting to have something tug at my heartstrings, or to, like, my heart's skipping a beat because it's like, oh shoot, am I gonna die here? So
you'll still just tell everybody you're fine, but
yeah, I even at 1 hit point, I could do this all day.
Yeah,
but that's just who Chevy is.
Right.
Yeah. Great sessions can still be challenging. I totally agree with that last point there, and I think that great sessions are challenging. I think by necessity. I don't ever go to a session thinking I'm gonna go through here, I'm gonna have a cakewalk of a battle, I'm gonna chit chat with my friends, and oh, that was a great session.
Mm-hmm.
I go to a session expecting, oh yeah, my wife is experiencing heartbreak because I'm not there, and my child seems to kind of hate me a little bit because I wasn't there for months, and she sings out the window wanting me to come home every night. And learning those types of things builds the story and ultimately makes the experience more fun for everybody at the table.
So let's talk a little bit, right? So this idea that the hobby's obsession with fun, I don't know if you've seen it, but over the course of the years, as TTRPGs have become more and more and more popular, you have this idea that the game needs to be safe and predictable, and those kind of, which it is. It, you don't ever want to put someone in a position where they're uncomfortable or don't feel safe, right? But I think when those things become the core of your entire campaign, and you can't experience tension, or you can't experience uncertainty or friction or any of those things, I think your campaign's just kind of forgettable.
You might as well play Candyland.
Right. It's just why?
Yeah.
Right. You just kind of are. I would leave my game and be like, huh.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I would move on to whatever it was I was going to do in the day, and I would completely forget whatever it was we've done.
Yep.
Right.
I think there are people, again, it hasn't happened to me, but I think I have seen people in forums discussing online about, like, it's okay to have your boundaries and to set them. And like, if someone says, I have a fear of spiders, I don't want spiders in the campaign, it would literally set me off, then great, I can remove that, but I can build something around orcs, or I can build something around, goblins or whatever, and make it just as fun.
Sure.
It doesn't have to trip anyone's, arachnophobia or whatever above the table. You can still have tension on the table,
right?
And still build that,
right?
So,
so some things that we just want to be real clear, so we're not, kind of misunderstood here. So tension doesn't mean toxicity, right? You're not sitting at a table with people that hate your guts or people you don't get along with. That's not the same, right? TTRPG tension is not the same as sitting at a table with toxic people. It is also not, tension is not conflict between people, right? You can have conflict between players, but it is not conflict between people. That is not tension. Tension in the world is pressure, right? Hard choices, time limits, moral trade-offs, resource scarcity, risk, stuff like that. And I'm not here to say that all of your tables need to be cookie cutter and those kind of things. I'm saying that stories need pressure, right? Could you imagine reading something like Lord of the Rings and taking out all of the tense moments out of the book?
Yeah.
You would be in the Shire, and there would be 11 C's, breakfast, third breakfast, eighth breakfast, 12th breakfast, and that's probably about as far as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Right? The sessions that people remember the most usually include stuff like, oh my gosh, I've made a terrible decision and its repercussions, or a sacrifice that's made a la Esteban, right? You're going to remember those sessions forever.
Yep.
A close call where the whole party maybe doesn't make it out. Good Lord. The Hunger Cottage or the morgue that we fought in the basement. These things are all things that you're going to remember forever. A moment of doubt. The look on Alara's face standing in the basement when she's trying to decide whether she needs to run for her life or stay and fight. Though it was a very small part of our stream and small part of the story, Lysander will remember that forever. Because that was a moment that he saw the fear and she chose to stay. Right? Huge. And there's this, like, great sessions kind of have a rhythm, and we talked about this earlier, right? So you have kind of like this buildup of pressure, then there's a choice, and then there's a release of the pressure, right? And that could look like a bunch of things. It could be that combat that you set up to try to release some of that pressure. It could be, you know, you build up this pressure and then there's a choice made. We're having this huge fight. The whole party starts going down. Building this pressure. The choice, I'm staying, I'm fighting. And then you have the release of, okay, she's staying, she's fighting. Now, whether or not that had anything to do with me rolling a natural 20 and breaking out of my paralysis and being able to heal everybody, I don't know, but I'm going to chalk it up to it did, right? It's all part of the moment. And those things you're going to remember forever. Yep. And it's all about the pressure.
That all touches on another point that I like to make, in that sometimes the dice are telling the story. And that, like, in that moment, had you not rolled a natural 20, had you rolled a natural 1 instead, where would Lysander be instead?
Yeah.
Like, it could have been a completely different outcome.
Where would everybody be at that moment? Like,
right.
And that's, you know, maybe that's we'll end with that, talking about that as we get closer to the end, but we still have some things we're going to talk about, but we'll talk about letting the dice tell the story and what that looks like, because some people are very afraid of that, of what happens when the dice tell those stories.
Wonder Llama and Jinx both said something similar to what you were saying about having failure, dramatic failure, tragedy, and maybe even death as defining like what winning is in the game. It's like, did you have fun? Were you engaged? Did you feel involved? That's how you define winning in a TTRPG. I don't look at it as
can you beat D&D, right?
You don't beat D&D, right? You're not there to accumulate the most wealth or to gain the most levels or kill the most things. You're there to tell a story with your friends, right? And sometimes that means dying, as sad as that is, right? Jinx says, I don't know about allergic, but the tense moments, the emotional moments, those have been some of the most memorable moments for me. Yep. And I totally agree with that as far as Soul Sever's concerned. Like those tense moments are the ones that you remember most, like Renela's dream sequence and her coming home, or sticks out in my mind most right now is Chevy coming home to his family. Those very tense moments are the ones that will stick with you.
Mother Quacker says, it reminds me of a quote, the string that produces a tuneful sound is not too tight, not too loose. It's about right, the right amount of tension. Right, so, and this goes right back to what we talked about at the beginning, right? You're in this dance or this collaboration with each other at the table. And just think if, for a moment, if, you know, Mert or myself or Amon or Ophelia decided in that moment that we were gonna, you know, tell an off-color joke and take that spotlight away from that moment where Alara is having this crisis, it very easily could have just been whitewashed away, right? And it's knowing your players and knowing your table and knowing the audience or knowing what you're doing, that you got to give people that space to breathe and have those moments, because I mean, that's what we're here for, right? We're here to tell these stories and watch these characters develop and become something that they may or may not have ever thought they could have been. I mean, so cool. So this idea of fun, it's an interesting thing, because as it's a very common misnomer that when something that is kind of a cult has a cult following, or like a cult classic or something, whenever it becomes more widespread or mainstream, people say it's getting the World of Warcraft effect done on it, where it's getting dumbed down and all of the grinding, nitty gritty grime gets stripped away because you're trying to make it more available to more people, making it more fun and more safe and more appealing. Your game doesn't have to be boring or not full of tension or not full of great stories just because it's being made available for people to play, right? The great thing about collaborative storytelling in TTRPGs is no one tells you how to tell your story, right? Even if you're running an adventure path,
And
no one tells you how to tell that story.
The cool thing about where we are today with today's technology that we weren't, in decades prior, is that you can play TTRPGs online now fairly easily with Roll20 and other applications like that. And you can find the table that fits you. If you don't want the grit and you don't want, that amount of tension, there are tables out there that will be more akin to what you're looking for. And there are tons of tables out there looking for players, and there's tons of players out there looking for DMs. So, with today's technology, it's very easy to find a table to play at.
And we do want to preface as we're talking here, because we are talking about some stuff that could rub people the wrong way, right? But if tension in your game becomes personal or unsafe, right? That's no longer tension, right? That's a boundary issue, and that's something that should be discussed with your game master.
Preferably at session 0.
Preferably at session 0, but even if you happen upon something that triggers you or makes you feel unsafe, or just kind of like it feels very personal to you, there is nothing that would stop you from having that conversation with your game master and just laying that out. Hey, maybe I didn't know I was going to be triggered by this, or maybe I didn't think we were going to talk about whatever this was, and I didn't really want everyone to know my business. But if tension becomes personal or uneasy, you've crossed a line.
Right. Yeah, you definitely don't want to alienate your players by doing that. But like I said, it's the GM's job to build tension and to, back to what we were saying before about accommodations, accommodate the players that are at the table.
Yep.
So if one person feels like they're not having fun because of something that's happening, then again, communication goes two ways. So it is that player's responsibility to communicate with their DM that, hey, this has crossed a line that I don't feel comfortable with. We need to end scene, go, just skip ahead to the next thing and not do this.
Right.
Yep.
And there's a very big difference between that conversation and a game that is just like has no tension and nothing of consequence in the story, right? So don't misconstrue what we're saying on that avenue. But if tension is essential to a great story, then not every group is actually built to hold that tension for a long time. Not every table deserves a long campaign. Not all groups are fit for distance. How do you feel about that?
The word deserves stands out to me here. I think the second line there, not all groups are fit for distance, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's actually more than fine. I've got a lot of experience in running one-shots where it's just like, hey, this group of players is going to meet for 1 week, and maybe it stretches into one-shots typically take more than 4 hours to play. Unfortunately, they're normally 2 shots. Maybe it's the 2, but then you're done. And that's the way a lot of games are played, and that's fine. Not every table deserves a long campaign. I think I don't agree with that deserves bit, because I think if that's what you want and that's what you're looking for in a table, I think you 100% deserve that.
So I will preface. So when I put this together, I don't mean that people don't deserve to have fun, right? But I do mean that not every group has the habits required to maintain a long story, right? And as a player who sits at a table that has run for years, if you are sitting at a table with people who don't have the habits to support a long-running campaign, it becomes detrimental to me as a player and the story overall. So again, if you want a long-running campaign, develop the habits that are required to run a long campaign.
It goes back to literally everything we've been discussing here as far as DM player communication, scheduling, knowing when to share the spotlight. Literally all these habits are habits that you have to form as a player or a DM to facilitate the overall well-being of the table, right? And if that's what you are looking for in a group of players and or DM, then you do need to have those habits ingrained in yourself so that you're not stealing the spotlight from someone, so that you're not disrupting gameplay by, just building a dice tower and knocking it over, right?
Sure.
Like, if you're not ingrained or not invested in the moment, then you're not invested in the whole campaign, and you're probably not gonna last. It's gonna fizzle out because people aren't invested in it.
Yeah, and I think when people sit down, with their friends on the couch and they're gonna, hey, we're gonna play this awesome D&D game, right? The overwhelming release of endorphins is like, oh, it's gonna be awesome. I'm playing this thing and blah blah blah, smash some dudes. And then reality sets in that, that's 4 hours of my day that I have to commit to whatever this is. And then I have to schedule for the next month. And then I have to be available. And then I also have to make sure that everyone else is available. And then I have to be on time. I have to be respectful to their spotlight, make sure everyone has a chance to do their thing. There's a lot that goes into this idea of a campaign that you kind of, I'm not saying that you don't have those things when you run one-shots, but it's much easier to, have a one-shot where you can kind of run over some of those things and still feel like you've had a successful one-shot, right? And as a game master, or even as players, it's a sign of a lot of maturity to be able to identify what kind of story or campaign or length of campaign your players can play at. Because there are times that I think that we could put together a really great, 4-episode campaign and rock it out, and I think we would kill it. And at the same token, I think, man, we could also turn around and do a 2-year campaign, and we would also kill that.
We've been doing it, right?
But I don't always think that the cast is the same for those.
Right. I agree.
Right? I think if you're looking at someone who's just going to thrive in an environment that's more of a sprint to the end, that 1 shots, 4 shots, whatever those become, you look for something very different. How do you tell a story that's compact, concise, burns hot, and is completely okay at the end of the day to either throw your character away because something happens and they don't exist anymore, or let them move on to obscurity? Because the golden part of these mini campaigns or small character arcs is you tell a very white hot story, and then you crumple everybody up and you throw them away, and you never revisit them other than in lore.
Yep.
And it takes a specific kind of person to lean into that and be like, I know that this guy doesn't live after we're done, or I know that the outcome is X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
Versus I'm playing in a campaign where I can be whatever I want to be. I can let the story develop me. I am anticipating that I'm going to live forever, kind of thing, right? Let's see what we got here. So Mother Quacker says 100%. She immediately reacted to the deserves as well. Not all campaigns are meant to be long, and short campaigns are not a punishment. That is correct, right? And it goes back to what I was just saying. It's this idea that you could have a very effective small arc or campaign or 1-shot, 2-shot, whatever it is, and still leave your table feeling very entertained and very fulfilled with their ability to tell a story. And that is a tell of a good game master and a good table, is when you can tell a short story and still leave the table feeling fulfilled.
Yep.
Right?
And again, I go back to session 0 and communication. Again, the game is only going to be as good as your communication skills, because the more you communicate with your DM, the more you can set those expectations both ways. And a lot of these expectations we are talking about here should be laid out at the session 0. Like, you should be telling your players, like, this is how long the campaign is going to last. This is what we're the kind of themes that we're looking at throughout the campaign. This is the kind of tension that we're going to be building, and what kind of investment do I expect from you? What do you expect from me? Those types of things are the things that should be communicated well up front, so that you can all have the same expectations going in and all know what you're getting yourselves into.
Right. Mother Quacker just talked about that. She's like hit the nail on the head to literally what you just said. So she said, I wish we could better set boundaries around campaign length out of the gate. I'd much rather finish something than be part of yet another multi-year endeavor that fades into the sunset with no resolution. In other words, let's normalize setting realistic campaign lengths for adults at various stages of life. Like, so I look at this as a very interesting. I've done some research in this very endeavor here, right? Especially with doing what we do on Twitch and YouTube and stuff like that. The idea behind what we do here, I feel like borderline is like TV sitcom, TV story, like kind of deal. Right. You should have seasons. So if you think of your normal season, you know, the normal season of a you know, early 2000 show is like 22 episodes, right? Where you get into those big seasons of stuff where lots of development. It would not, I don't think it would be that difficult to say up front, hey, we're going to tell a story. We're going to tell a story, and it's going to be roughly about 20 to 23 episodes basing on what we want to do at the end. And just say, can you commit to 20 to 23 episodes telling this kind of story with this kind of parameter? And then sit down and say, okay, I have, you know, as a game master, I have 23 episodes to tell this story, or whatever that number is, right? 23, 8, 4, 2.
Get your outline together.
To get your shit together, right. And come back to the table with your players and say, okay, we got 8 episodes to tell this story. Where do we start? How do we develop? How do you guys get this? Yep. You know, how do we tell this story in 8 episodes? Because I think that is, to be completely honest, that's the next evolution of where I think online, what like Critical Role and Dimension 20 and what those guys are doing.
Yep.
Is it's not the 5-year campaign like Critical Role. I think those are great and people love those and it's awesome. But it's being able to tell a concise, clear story in 20 episodes that will get people like, oh, I can watch this in a weekend and be completely done and be fulfilled and know characters and have this awesome emotional roller coaster. I love this. This is great. I think that's where we're headed. Like,
I like what they're doing now with campaign 4.
The West Marches stuff?
Yeah, where you know, you have a group of people, you have the soldiers table, you have the, what do they call it, the rogues
Seekers.
table, or like the seekers. Yeah, you've got like these different sort of themed tables where it's like, okay, these guys are going to be focused mainly on battling things and killing things. These guys are looking at getting information. It's like, okay, so you have these themes, but then that's giving other players weeks off too. You rotate around, rotate out. I think that could be good for storytelling as well, and we could probably learn something from that.
Sure.
That, like, if we were to develop a larger cast, right, we could, you know, do different stories at different times. And just rotate cast in and out. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's something that I've talked about at length, and I think that it would be awesome for us to develop that skill, to be able to say, I can tell a whole story in 8 episodes, right. You know, 4 episodes, 12 episodes, or even if you get into the point where, yeah, I am going to run a year-long campaign. I'm going to tell you a 52 episode story, 1 episode a week for a year. You know it's going to be a year, but you know at the end of the year, we've got everything wrapped up, right? And I think it goes right back to what Mother Quacker is saying. It's just this idea that you're telling a story that kind of feels endless running. And it's not that it is endless, but it's just you just don't have the timeline laid out in front of you of when that end will be.
Yeah.
Right?
We don't know how long it's going to take us to settle the rift thing. We know that's our goal, and that's probably like, there's probably going to be some other things that we want to wrap up with our character stories and whatnot, but we're going to get there eventually.
Right.
Hopefully sometime this year,
right.
In this calendar year, right? And that's going to be the conclusion to everyone's stories. And, you know, that's great to have a 3-year long campaign at that point, I think. Is it how long it'll be? Yeah.
Yep.
But I can tell you from my experience in running a nearly 3-year long campaign, again, only once a month, but I definitely didn't expect that. And I would much rather run shorter length stories, I think, in the future.
Pyrokite says, I think one-shots can be some of the most fun campaigns depending on the story. All types of campaigns are valid. 100%. Yeah, we're not telling you or trying to direct you into what it is that you need to play. We just wanted to make light to not every table or every cast of table or every game master is designed to run a marathon game.
Yep.
Right? It takes a lot. It takes a lot of commitment. It takes a lot of the player pouring themselves into the story, the game master pouring themselves into the story over and over and over again to keep something like that with enough momentum that it just doesn't turn into a slog.
Right.
Right?
Pyrokite was actually in one of my one-shots, one of my first one-shots that I developed, actually. So thanks for tuning in, Pyrokite.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move on down.
Streaming has taught people how to perform TTRPGs, not how to play them. Games judge play, not viewers. Games judge play, not viewers. Okay. I can see where this is going. So I think I agree with this to some extent, in that, like, if you sit down and watch Critical Role, all of the campaigns, you're not learning how to play D&D 5e. You're learning how these people play D&D 5e and just like what's happening above the table or like on the table. You're not seeing like their character sheets behind the scenes, or like what are Matt and all the players talking about behind the scenes to develop the story, to develop, you could use this item. Maybe I'll make it available in a shop upcoming or something. Like, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you, again, back to the communication piece, communicate with your DM, because ultimately you're going to tell the best story by communicating. But back to the question, watching Critical Role, watching Brennan Lee Mulligan and Dimension 20, you're seeing a bunch of professional performers play a game much more enthusiastically, I think, than what anyone could expect a normal group of people, an average group of people to do. You're looking at a performance. And to some extent, Elite Encounters, you're looking at a performance. We are, I think, more close to that group of friends that's just sitting down to play a game together. But to some extent, we are here to also entertain our viewers, right?
Sure.
So you're looking at how, you're being taught how to perform a TTRPG. How you actually play a TTRPG is really built into a lot of mechanics behind the scenes, a lot of rules behind the scenes that takes a lot of time reading to truly understand all those rules. And props to Patrick and Seer and you and Mert and everybody who spends a lot of time building characters and learning the ins and outs of Pathfinder or D&D or whatever system you're playing, because it takes a long time to develop those skills and to be able to remember how swimming mechanics work, for example.
Right.
Like, I've got to make an athletics check every time I want to swim, unless your name's Chevy, because you got to swim speed. Right. Like, these are things that you're not normally encountering, so you got to look them up ahead of time. Again, it's about knowing where you're going, communicating with your DM communicating with the players to know, like, hey, you guys are going to be swimming next episode. Look into the swim mechanics so you understand how this works and how underwater fighting works. Unless your name's Chevy.
Right. Right. So I want to talk about some things. So like, what are some things like when you talk about like a streaming emphasis on a game, right? So there are things like pacing, right? Mm-hmm. When I sit down at your house and we're playing D&D on Sunday, the word pacing never comes out of my mouth. It's never entered my mind.
Because if we don't finish, we can finish next month.
Right. So pacing is an interesting idea, because pacing in and of itself lends to the idea that at some point, at some level, all of this has got to be planned, right? I'm not saying it's scripted, but Patrick or Seer or whatever has an idea kind of where we're at and where we're headed. And I know at some points in times in our existence, it has been, you have to get to point A and you have to be at point B when we end. You got to get there because next episode is X, Y, and Z. Yeah. For whatever reason. Could be we have a guest coming in to play a character that is only here for one weekend, or, whatever, right? Or someone's going to be gone and we got to make sure we wrap up whatever this is before they're gone, right? Pacing. I never once talked about pacing at any of my home games ever. And we talk about it a lot here on Elite Encounters about what that looks like. entertainment, right? I don't know that we talk about entertainment, like the entertainment value of what we do. I think we just kind of lean on the idea that we hope that we are entertaining.
Yeah.
Because I think when you start talking about the idea of being entertaining, you're almost telling, I'd be like, Nate, you need to be more entertaining. Then I think at that point, I'm crossing the line trying to tell you how to play your character. And that's never anything that we want to do, right? We don't ever want to dabble in the idea of taking your personal agency away from your character.
Right.
Because we don't want to take it away from your player to the game. We want Nate to tell Chevy's story. We don't want Nate to tell Mike's version of Chevy's story, right?
The idea is that like we're all a group of friends sitting down to play a game together, and hopefully that in and of itself is entertaining to other people out there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So then you have things like character moments on cue, right? And that goes back to the idea of pacing, going from point A to point B. Okay, if we're going to get to point B today, Chevy, you're going to be home.
Yeah.
It's coming. Now,
there have been moments where, like, for example, Seer had a letter for me.
Sure.
And I was like, well, I don't want to read this right now. Then she'll text me above table and be like, I need Chevy to read that because I've got Kilara here to read it.
Right.
So she's got to read it. So it's like, yeah, there is some pacing there, and it's like, okay, well, I need to say now, okay, Chevy's going to step aside and read this in private.
Right.
So that we can get this out of the way, right?
Right.
So,
and again, we're not saying that any of these things are bad, but it leads to that idea of performing this idea of TTRPGs versus playing them, right? I think in home games, they kind of often lend to, like, there's a lot more pauses, right? You take a lot of, like, there's a lot of downtime where you're just kind of like, hey, I don't remember what the grapple rules are. Let me grab my book and let me look it up and let me flip through and read it and figure it out before I do whatever this thing is, right? There's more rules talk in general, which I will say, I really love what Patrick does with actually, because I think what it does is it allows us to lean on that performance side of what we're doing, but then we can still circle right back around and be like, hey, we fucked up last week, and here's the actual rules, and here's how we're going to do it moving forward.
Make a ruling in the moment to continue momentum, and then circle back when you have time.
Right, because I don't think you would do that as a at home play, right? You would stop and you'd be like, oh, what do you mean you're gonna whatever this? Let's look up the rule, right? So we can get it right.
I generally have a rule of, like, if it's going to take me less than 2 minutes, I'll look it up. If I've spent more than 2 minutes on it, I'm going to make something up and move on.
Right.
Because I want to continue the momentum
Sure.
of the game, right?
The ideas of, like, side conversations, right? I know we still struggle with every show that we do, of just, like, knowing that when Chevy is talking, everyone else is just kind of like listening and having that time. But I can't tell you the number of times I would just lean over to, Ernela and just whisper stupid, I'd like to pet that dog right in the middle of the show, has no meaning, nothing to do. It's just dumb. And it gets her to laugh, and that's hilarious. But, and that definitely leads more toward, like, a home game style where you're just kind of, like, interacting with each other as friends that you are.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that boils down to this, what people call, like, the performance tax, right? You're afraid to look stupid online. You're afraid to make dumb, bad voices. If you do that, if you make voices, you're afraid to make a bad voice, so you don't make any. Or you're afraid to have combat because it's going to be slow, right? Yeah. And I think the biggest thing is when you're performing a TTRPG, when you're afraid of silence.
I think we do a great job of that on Soul Severed, actually. There are times where there is a long pause, and I noticed that on, maybe it was last week's stream, maybe the week before last, but there was a very long pause at one point, and those long pauses help to build tension in the moments where like Gale doesn't know what decision to make for his family,
Right.
or your Nayla's taking a minute to think about what she's going to say to Sunshine, because oh no, I don't think the sea elf was overbearing. I think you were overbearing.
Right.
And it's like those pauses help to build the tension of like we all know what's happening, but you just take a moment to think about those things. And again, it helps with the audience to feel that tension as well.
So, what is? There's a couple follow-up questions here.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say streaming has helped or hurt your home table?
Overall, vastly helped. Like I don't feel, at least from any of my players, I don't feel a Matt Mercer effect, if you will, of like, you're not making the funny voice in this moment.
Right.
Like, I don't feel the pressure from my players at all to do that. But I will say that by watching Matt Mercer, watching Brennan Lee Mulligan, and all these other great DMs, I have learned a heck of a lot. Not just from the performance aspect, but there are plenty of other streams that they've done or YouTube videos that they've done where they talk about mechanically, like, how does this work? What do they do behind the scenes? So I can learn from both aspects of like how to be a good performer, which I am not trained in at all on how to be a performer. It took me a long time to work out Chevy's dumb accent.
Hey, I got thrown at it last week, and I thought I did all right.
You did pretty good
For the guy on the dock.
Yeah. You don't know how many times I watched the 1 minute clip of Channing Tatum doing the Gambit over and over and over again. Just all of his bits from that X-Men movie, or it was Deadpool versus Wolverine. It's only about a 1 minute or 2 minute clip of like all of his talking scenes where he has lines just strung together. I watched that probably hundreds of times at this point to get down, like, I didn't want to do a Cajun accent to that extent, but to get down some semblance of a Cajun accent.
Right.
Because I think he actually did a really good job after looking at some actual Cajun accent videos. There are obviously times where he's over the top and not making any sense.
Right.
But, like, for the most part, he did a really good job. So, yeah, back to the question, streaming has overwhelmingly helped me become a better performer because I'm not trained, and to become a better player and or DM mechanically.
I think it's, when I look at that question, whether I think that streaming has obviously helped or hurt our table, I mean, you can't say it's hurt our table, because I mean, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if they didn't do what they did, right?
We, as a group of 7 people, 8 if you count Jinx, right? Which sometimes you do.
Sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't. I don't think we would all have met and or been together. I mean, obviously some subset of us would have, right? But the 8 of us wouldn't be in the same room every week playing the same game and, you know, ultimately experiencing the same experience had Critical Role not existed.
Sure.
If Critical Role hadn't existed, I don't think there would have been at any point in time for this to have evolved to the way that it has.
I agree. And I do understand, having come from that, you know, playing in your living room on the couch environment, not around the table, not around, you know, the very combat in the eye of the minds, you know, theater of the mind kind of idea. I think that as a table, it kind of goes back to what Mother Quacker was saying earlier. We need to get to this idea where we can normalize this idea of having like a length of a season or a length of a campaign. On the same token, I think we can go to this place where we can normalize, like, a table is kind of like messy friendly, where, hey, I feel like Tuesday's that way, where it's kind of like we can all sit around and tell dick jokes, and we can all laugh at each other's funny things that we do, and we can all have a great time. But at the end of the day, when it's time to tell the story, we tell the story, and we get great value out of watching each other grow in that environment. And I think we do a really nice job of just celebrating like the awkward attempt, right? And I go back to Kristen talking as Ernela and apologizing and saying, you know, please and thank you in the middle of her intimidation, and rolling the natural 20, and then it works. Like, you know, it's just like this idea of you can't put people in a box and expect them to perform or role play this way every time, and not let them have the autonomy to do whatever they feel in the moment, right? Because if you don't take risks, you'll never gain the rewards, right? So, and I think it's interesting that the idea of being afraid of silence is, and I mean, we've talked about it, the idea of, okay, you know, if someone's looking something up, or you know, someone is trying to learn how to play their character for the first time live on the internet, the idea of trying to fill the gap while they're doing the thing, it almost, it doesn't feel like it's required, but you kind of get that like, oh man, what's happening
back to
here?
the pacing thing. It's like, we've got a goal in mind here, and if we spend 5 minutes trying to figure out what this one ability does, then we're wasting time.
Yeah, and we're not going to make whatever that thing is, right? You know, and I don't want to say that we can't be a silly group of people that sit around on the table and play your mom's, you know, your mom's D&D in her basement, drinking Mountain Dew and eating Funyuns. That is very successful for some groups, you know, like XP to level 3 or whatever. That's what they remind me of. It's like those guys are great. I love everything that they do. But they feel like that group that's been together forever, and they just don't care, and they're just going to do whatever they do and have a great time with it. And they are awesome.
They have a great Curse of Strahd campaign, by the way, if you haven't watched it.
Yeah, I have. I've seen it. And those kind of things are not the norm when you think about streaming live play groups, right? You think people who are trying to walk up the mountain that was paved by Critical Role or made by Dimension 20 or Glass Cannon or any of those big guys at the top. The game down here at the bottom is trying to figure out how you're going to be different than they are, and how you're going to do it differently than they did, right? And that may mean that you never make it to the top, but that doesn't mean that you didn't tell awesome stories along the way, or have great character development, or have great awesome moments that are emotional and that kind of stuff, because those absolutely exist even in the stuff that we create. And you know, we don't have millions and millions of followers or subscribers and things like that correct yet, but I think we tell some really good stories, and we tell a really good emotionally charged story. And I think that we have a set of cast that you know, if you take out professionalism out of the top, I think we rival anybody that's on the internet.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, just tooting our own horn here. Okay.
I think if you turn the cameras off, I think if we kept the same group of people here, I think we would still play the same way, to be honest with you.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And when people try to make content instead of playing, I think that they often confuse chaos for creativity, right? So too many players confuse chaos with creativity. Chaos isn't freedom, it's just a mess, right? So that's a kind of a mouthful here, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Sometimes it's really easy to sit at a table where you may be disconnected because you're not interested, or some of these other things we've talked about has caught you in a place where you're not connected, or you don't feel like the world is answering to your whims or responding to your actions, or you know, you haven't had that communication with your GM to help pull you in, and so it just turns into oh, I'll just laugh at the silly joke. But it's not till I just laugh at the silly joke. It's now it becomes something that I'll tell the same joke next week and then the same joke the following week. And it just kind of becomes something that you grow your identity to, but there's not really anything creative that's coming out of whatever this expression is. Mm-hmm. It just turns into a mess. Like you just kind of are like, oh, I'm just telling dick jokes to tell dick jokes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm just filling time because I have to fill time because that's what I feel like my only job is.
Yeah.
And that's where you start getting into this very dangerous path as a player and maybe as a game master where you kind of let some of these things start to spiral out of control and some of your tables start falling into this like trope where, okay, now it becomes real hard to schedule people to come play because no one wants to be around 83 dick jokes in a session, or no one wants to have, you know, you can even go as far as to be like, you know, people don't want to have someone crying at the table every episode because they think it's the most emotional moment in the game that ever existed every week, right? I mean, there's a time and a place for those things. And I think that when you react randomly in those things, it's generally just because you're trying to take the moment from whatever is going on. And I think it's because, based on my own kind of observation, I feel like it's because you don't really know what's going on or what should be going on, and you get into that paralyzing fear of, well, something should be going on. Something has to be going on. So let me just throw some shit out and see if it sticks to the wall. What do you think about that? Like, what do you think about the idea of having a player or somebody, I mean, even a game, I've seen game masters even go down this route where they just kind of word vomit on the table because they don't know what's going on. Their players have taken a left when clearly they prepared for a right. Mm-hmm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about with decisions being impactful and random encounters being impactful, or the world reacting to you know, what the players are doing, right? So it's like you shouldn't just be doing something to fill space or to fill volume, right? You should be doing something that means something. Sometimes that is the dick joke that relieves the tension, because you have, like, you can't just let it fizzle. You gotta, like, maybe that is the dick joke that ends the tension and we can, like, move on. Maybe, like, you know, Civril and Sunshine are having a fight and it's like, oh no, mom and dad are fighting. Hey, here's some cookies.
Yeah, right.
Like, yeah, maybe we've got to do something like that. But ultimately, those decisions and those actions should have a goal in mind, and that is to, in that moment, like I said, it relieves the tension.
Right.
It shouldn't be just, oh, I'm here for 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever to, you know, fill the space and entertain an audience. So I'm going to do my stand-up comedy routine, right? Like we as a group have a goal of entertaining people, entertaining ourselves, and playing a game that has an impactful story. So the moments that we fill should have impact to that degree, right? We shouldn't just be stealing the spotlight from someone who may have something impactful to say.
Right. So there was this idea that I it may have been Abria Iyengar that I got this from, but I can't remember. It was one of them. Said that she has no qualms stealing the spotlight from people. But her goal when she steals the spotlight from someone is to replace it with something better and inclusive to the person that they took it from. Mm-hmm. So it's always this idea that you may be telling a story. You know, you may be telling Chevy's story about coming home, and Civril isn't, you know, I'm not the one that's going to take that spotlight, but it's like if someone were to move into that moment, like let's say Kilara was going to come in and have a moment where she kind of bleeds that spotlight from Chevy as he's kind of reconnecting to his wife. Her goal should be how does she change that narrative into something that is just as meaningful or as impactful, not excluding Chevy, but trying to develop more side of that story. Right. And it goes to something, like, your wife could have wore her wedding ring around her necklace, and she taken it off when you left and put it on the necklace because she doesn't want to wear it on her hand because that's the hand that you used to hold. And as as you guys come up and have this interaction, Kilara could slide in and be like, hey, you can put that ring back on now. And then it opens up this narrative to like, oh, well, why didn't you have the ring? Oh, bam, boom, bam. Now you have this emotionally charged moment where she's telling you that she took the ring off and she wears it close to her heart because that's where she feels you. And now she puts it on her hand because that's the hand that she holds, so that way your hands would be close and the rings would be close as this eternal promise kind of thing. Boom, Merry Christmas, here we are. Those are those kind of ideas that if you're going to take the spotlight or push yourself into a spotlight, enhance what's there and build something greater on the other side, versus just be like, I'll take that because my story's more important than yours, which is never really the case, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the second sentence here. Chaos isn't freedom, it's just a mess. Like when you sit down as a table and have goals in mind as a table, to do whatever, you cannot inherently be chaotic. There can be chaotic moments, but you cannot have an entire persona around chaos, because ultimately that derides from the goal that you've set forth, right? And if a table is going to be successful, again, it's all about communication and it's all about following through with your actions, right? Too many players confuse chaos with creativity. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but definitely agree with the chaos isn't freedom part.
So that too many players confuse chaos with creativity. That is born from the if you've watched any of the like the comedy first tables, where it's like the whole idea is how do I continue to ramp up the dick joke to the next dick joke to the next thing, where eventually you've lost the whole point of whatever it was you were talking about, and it's just a stand-up comedy. You've run down the improv rabbit trail of surprise you're a pink unicorn with a raging green mohawk or something. Like, it's just you've lost the whole intent of what you were actually doing, and you've just chased the laugh to the point where you don't even know why you're laughing anymore. And most of the times you're probably not laughing anymore. But Mother Quacker is very skilled on this idea of improv and like chasing the laugh versus kind of like setting the laugh up and seeing if you can elicit the laugh, versus kind of like hammering it home and expecting the laugh, right? It's kind of interesting. Okay, so we're rounding the corner here, just past 9 o'clock here. We got about 30 minutes, and I think we're going to spend the last good chunk of time. We kind of talked about a little bit earlier, and this one isn't on my list, so I don't have a cool little card for it. So, shame on me. But we talked about earlier this idea of letting the dice tell the story. Right. And I will say the card here would be too many players are afraid to let the dice tell the story. And some of the things I think that I lean on here is when you're telling that kind of story, when you're afraid to let the dice tell the story, I think you haven't defined what your success is. And it goes back to what Wander Llama was saying earlier. Sometimes success isn't your character coming out okay at the end. Sometimes success is your character dying, or a noble sacrifice, or whatever the thing is. And I think if you walk into a campaign and you haven't defined what success looks like, and I don't think that it's always I don't think you walk in as a character and go, okay, my character's going to die before the end of the campaign, and I think that's going to be success for him, right? I think you walk in and I think you have an idea of what success looks like if you live all the way through, and then you have success if you were to die before the end of the campaign. What does that look like? Are you okay with that? Right? Is that how do you build towards something that you know is going to pay off by not resolving to the end? What are your takes on that? The dice telling the story. It's interesting. I know we talk about it a lot on Bloodlords and stuff like that, letting the dice tell the story that they want. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's the magic, isn't it? I think that's the magic of what we do. Because if you aren't rolling dice, then I think at that point you might as well just be like reading a book.
Right. If everything's predetermined, no matter what the dice say, then you ultimately are just narrating a story. You're not improvising anymore. You're not like the dice. If the decision is going to have a certain outcome, no matter what the dice roll says, then don't roll the die.
Right.
It's just taking up time and people counting on their fingers to do math, right?
Correct.
So
stay in school, kids.
Yeah. So yeah, in my opinion, like dice rolls are meant to convey impact, in that like this could fail. This could ultimately mean that I don't climb that wall. I fall down, or ultimately I, fail my DC check by so much that this flame engulfs me and now I'm dead. Or step on a glyph and get turned into a pile of dust. Right. So like, ultimately there should be a certain amount of randomness to the game, in that like, yeah, you've got these traps laid out, you've got these enemies here planned out and everything, but the dice are going to decide whether or not that is successful to some degree. And I'm a huge proponent of that, and I want the players to be able to tell the story for their character that they set out in mind, but also I want ultimately there to be a chance of failure and a chance of that not coming true, because ultimately if everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows, then what's the point of telling the story?
What does that look like when you have, so let's say you have a story written out for Chevy, right? And you kind of have this idea of where he's going and where you'd like to take him. What does that look like when you're in those battles where you're standing there with one hit point and you're like, man, I am one bad roll away from, sucking face on the ground. What runs through your head? Like, I mean, maybe not at that exact moment, because you're usually just like, I'm fine, I got this. My God, I have one hit point. But as a player, what is that? What runs through your mind in those moments?
So on the player level, it's more like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to dig up one of my hundreds of backup characters in a moment. No. I mean, like you said, Chevy's gonna sit there and take the hit no matter what, because he's there to tank for the party and to be a badass. But Nate is thinking like, okay, I've developed this story and I've told this much of this, and it's like, okay, that would suck if that ended right now, because I had all this other stuff planned out here that I wanted to have happen. But if Chevy's story gets cut short at 30%, then that's where Chevy's story ends, I guess. That's where the dice, that's part of the fun and the investment of the game comes, is that, like, to me at least, there is a risk of that failure, and the risk of I'm invested because I've written this out and had a whole plan, and that might not come true. And that's where you get into those moments of like, I got to make it out of this alive and figure out what to do. And if that means, staying here and taking one more hit and hoping that Sunshine's got a heal in her bag for me, then that's what it is. In some cases. In other cases, it might be, okay, I've got to roll over here behind several and, use my Mortal Herald dedication to heal myself for an action. So that's part of the reason why I took that, is that, like, ultimately Chevy's got more story to tell. He wants to come back to Marathel after the whole rift thing is settled, hopefully. And
Sunshine says, "Ask for damn help."
it's hard to do when you're this deep into something, Sunshine. Like, come on. So in the moment, it's like, hopefully make it out of this alive, because I've got this much more story to tell. But in the end, like, me as a player, I would be okay with that fizzling out and ending short if that's the story that the dice decide to tell, because ultimately that's still going to be a good story. And then in a session or two, we'll roll into a new character and I'll have a brand new story to tell and new dick jokes to tell you guys.
Right. So what is that? Okay, so just walk me through. Let's say Chevy doesn't make it. And let's say his life is cut short and you don't get to finish telling his story. How do you as a player find yourself in an avenue where you can follow up on that story, or maybe get some of that story out into place where, I've only told 30% and I have 70% more. I mean, for God's sakes, what is your wife going to do if you don't come home, right? Like, what is that? What happens to your child? What happens to, like,
right.
You have all of these things that are out there hanging, and it's interesting that the response is, okay, I'll just dig up my other backup character and I'll roll into someone else, shift personalities, screw that to, Gambit accent.
And obviously it wouldn't be like the same session, right?
Sure.
I mean, eventually that's what you've got to do, because we're playing a game. Like, ultimately it's like, it is a game, and it is something that you invest time into and invest into that character. So it is emotional to some extent, but at some point you've got to lift the veil and say, okay, it's time to move on.
Right.
So I think it's important to have the moments where, let's say Chevy dies. I think it's important to narrate, I don't know, maybe a funeral scene, or maybe, something where, like, his wife or Clara gets, I don't know, a sword or something. Like, there's got to be these moments of, there was this other 60% of the story to tell, but we've got to get, like, that story ultimately can't happen.
Right.
So we've got to wrap up Chevy's story in a meaningful way. And how do I do that? And, we've got to do it in a relatively short period of time.
Sure.
Pacing.
Sure.
So I think it's important to have allow player agency in that regard, because ultimately it's not Sear's story to tell that what happens to Chevy when he dies, right? It's still Chevy's story to tell, and there's meaningful ways to do that.
Right.
So I think, again, back to the conversations bit, like, you got to have conversations and communication with your DM and find a meaningful way for both the player and the rest of the table to wrap that up.
What's your answer as a game master to, let's say, a player who just doesn't want their character to die, and that's the story the dice are telling? Like, what's that answer? What's that look like?
Sometimes it's just, I'm sorry, but, like, your character's dead. Like, Willem has died.
Right.
Like, he didn't fight me on that, obviously, but and I've never had a player fight me on that. But ultimately, it's like, the dice are telling that story, and there's only so much DM fiat I can pull here and give you so much leverage. If you're rolling 12 nat ones in a row, maybe you should just walk away from the table for the time being. Like,
brother, it's time to call him sick.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, this is part of the contract that you sign when you come to the table in session 0. It's like, these are part of the expectations you should have. And I tell all my players when they come to the table, it's like, you should expect to some degree that in every single battle, you have a risk of dying. That's how I'd play my game. In every single battle, I don't want you to die, but that's like what part of the fun is. And like, there is a risk of dying. There's ultimately, like, bigger things going on in the world where, like, a literal dragon god has come down to wreak havoc, and it's up to you to stop it. And if you don't, then
you don't.
Right. Like, if you all die in the process, then you're dead, and the world is probably going to go to ruin until another group of adventurers step up and take the reins. Right. So, and that's the fun of the story, is that like there could be failure, and like I said, that has to be predetermined in session 0. If you want all rainbows and sunshine, then you've got to lay that out up front. And in my mind, that's not a table that I want to play at.
Right.
That's just somewhere where I'm going to draw the line and say, no, I'm the DM, and this is how I'm going to run the table. And if you don't like it, then tough beans, I guess.
Right. When it's interesting because I think part of the fun of telling these stories and building out relationships with characters, fictional characters in your head with other fictional characters in someone else's head, is this idea. I feel like I'm not expressing this very okay. So like every Monday when I walk into Bloodlords, under the expectation that is the last time I'm going to play Lysander. Okay?
Yeah.
And so my job when I sit down at the table is, how do I impact this story the most that I can in the 3 hours that I'm here? Right? And when the day comes that Lysander is no longer with us, it's then the idea of, did I do enough to leave an impact on the players and the people that played with Lysander or were in that group with Lysander, that at the end of the campaign, they're going to be like, hey, do you remember that Lysander dude? Like, he was legit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, those are the moments I think that you look for as when you play with letting the dice tell the story is yeah, you can tell the narrative of what happens in your epilogue, what happens to my family and that kind of stuff, but ultimately you're playing those games at that point for the idea of, when we reach the end, the people that I've played with are going to go, we wouldn't have made it if it wasn't for this guy or this. Do you remember when he did that? Do you remember that? Like, those are those moments that you call back on, that if you don't let the dice tell those stories, that I don't think you get those. I don't think you get those moments because I don't think the risk is there. Right? And I don't think the risk to reward ratio is worth the time investment at that point.
Yeah. That's ultimately why Chevy does some of the things that he does, is that, like, I know as a player, because I've played TTRPGs for long enough and have delved into all the mechanics of the system enough to know that most of the decisions that Chevy makes are not the optimal decision.
Sure.
Diving into a Grindylow battle where it looks like there's only 2 Grindylows there, I know what's happening behind the scenes is there's going to be more than these 2 stupid Grindylows.
Right.
But narratively, Chevy's flashy.
Right.
And I'm here to tell a story, right? So it's like, yeah, I'm going to teleport behind them because y'all are slow. I'm going to get there fast and show you all up.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that there's something else coming.
Right.
And it's not the optimal decision. Again, also knowing that the dice are going to tell the story, and if Chevy gets harpooned, then Chevy's getting harpooned, and Chevy's getting swallowed for the 3rd time in this campaign. So, like...
Right?
I think those, back to what you're saying, those are the moments that people are going to remember and that people are going to tell when things are said and done.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Wonder Llama said something here.
Yeah, so Wonder Llama said that some systems are better than others for players that really, really don't want to die. Mm-hmm. There are systems where players can come back. There are systems where you can continue to play as flashbacks or in some other way, and there are systems where death is final and brutal. Picking the right system for the game and your players and you that you want to play is a big part of GMing. That's 100% true, right?
Yep.
And Patrick says it every week with the hero points, right? We don't play with hero points on Tuesday. And so that's kind of interesting in and of itself that there is no get out of jail free card on Tuesday. But on Monday, I can't tell you the number of times that those hero points have saved our entire existence.
Sunshine is our hero point system.
100%. I believe that. Yep. So we should all walk around with little sunshines. I'd like to trade in my sunshine. Yeah.
Can you heal me next round?
Yeah, note for you there, Jenny. Get us little sunshines. Anyway, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like there's absolutely something to be said as a game master when you sit down to play, to discuss what system you're going to play or what mechanisms you have to save yourself from death, or just even, what is the lethality of your campaign that you're looking at running, right? Mm-hmm. Are you doing like a grim dark campaign where it should be expected that 60% of the table is going to be dead by the time you get to halfway through the campaign and on their third character? Welcome to Call of Cthulhu, right? Like, I mean, those are the expectations that I think you have to set in session zeros and in conversations with your players as a game master or player to game master. Is what is the expectation that my character doesn't make it? Because that also depends on how I build and how connected and that kind of stuff. But you don't ever want to let the risk of your character dying make you make a shallow character.
Right. Because
then you miss all the reward of the things that your character does. It goes right back to the smallest pebble into the largest ripple, right? And it's very Lysander-y thing to say. It's like the smallest pebble is like, what's the least amount of effort I can do to get the biggest impact? But that's 100% the truth. Like when you look at those things and the dice are actually telling the story, you crave those moments where you're like, where do I put my fingerprints on here and on here and here?
It's min-maxing the story versus min-maxing the character.
100%. 100%. And there's a lot to be said for people who can do that. How do you make the most of your 3 hours at the table versus making the most of your character that's on the character sheet? So yeah, man, we have burned right through all 12 of our topics. We've talked about a little bit about the when the dice tell the story or refuse to tell the story that you want to tell. I hope that you guys had a good time. I know I had a good time. Nate, did you have a good time? Yeah. Nate and I always have a good time when we get to sit around and talk about nerd stuff. So normally you would be tuning in to Bloodlords on Monday night, 6:30 to 9:30, but unfortunately we had to postpone due to inclement weather. Tomorrow, all things considered, weather considered, we should be here at 6 p.m. On this channel for the Soul Severed campaign. We will be over back under the RPG section. I think I put us under the just chatting section for tonight just because we weren't really doing any rolling or any kind of character stuff, so I just kind of threw us under that. We will be back over on the role-playing game section, so you can check us out there. Wednesday night, Barnabas will be on painting. I don't know if you tuned in last week, but he was painting Big Remy, and he looks awesome. I cannot wait to see him on the table. And man, I had a good time. Thank you, Nate, for coming and hanging out with me and having a good time. As always, if you want to comment about all the things we got wrong or all the things that you disagree on, the things that we agreed on, drop a line in the you got to be a menace to your team next week. You got to hit everybody with that awesome crit double whammy sound blast doing 40 damage and killing people. That's what we do here. But drop a line in Discord. If you're not part of the Discord, jump in there. Follow us on Twitch, subscribe to us on YouTube. All those things are free and they help us. Just let us know that you love the content that we're making here at Elite Encounters. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
See ya.